Welcome to your in-depth astrology overview and Zodiac forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the start of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the following month. I'll then go through all the key influences in detail, frame by frame, to give us a collective overview. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. But also please do click or tap the bell notification symbol. This is a month when relationships are going to be very much to the fore. But what is a relationship? It's not just an intimate, romantic kind. It can be any kind of connection with another person, be it our colleagues, our family members, even our connection to ourselves. And it is going to be sharply in focus as we come into this new month. And initially, I feel there is going to be a sense of optimism. And this is coming from Jupiter, the planet of growth. Now, Jupiter, when it moved into Cancer early in June, was afflicted almost immediately by the more limiting energies of the greater malefic Saturn. Later this month, as the month goes on, the two are actually going to be collaborating brilliantly. And in fact, through the last week of October, I've got some very exciting news for you, because there's going to be a grand water trine that's very, very potent indeed. But also Jupiter is clashing with Mercury at the start of the month, and then goes on to be in a right angle with the Sun. So it will need some careful handling, but whether we are wanting to link with other people collaboratively through our work, through our interests, through our social interaction, or we are more focused on that more intimate connection, this is going to be an important month. But as it goes on, Mercury, the communicator, diving deep early in the month on the 6th into the sign of investigation, Scorpio, is going to be merging with the potent traditional ruler of that sign, which is Mars. And if there are some questions that aren't being answered, or we feel someone's being evasive or putting off committing to something, perhaps around a partnership, it's possible that we'll want to just really punch through and get to the answers that are really important. And therefore, in the second part of the month, the last third, I think it gets a lot more intense. Very intense, as I will share with you. But that can bring some excitement for some people, but I think it also can bring some confrontation for others. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person. But understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart right at the top of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of the two luminaries. So the position of the Sun in the sign of Libra is in the first decan of that sign, which is sub-ruled by Venus. Venus can be, in terms of its influence of the sign overall of Libra, very much about charm, diplomacy, harmony. And the exciting thing is that Venus is going to return to the sign of Libra on the 14th of this month and will forge a dazzling alliance with the electric Uranus and the transformational and penetrative energies of Pluto. Therefore, if we're connecting to people who share our values, who we feel a sense of connection with in an exciting way, there is a dazzle that can bring some spark. But early in the month, you can see the sun and the moon's high in the sky. It's in detriment, it's in the sign of Capricorn. The moon here can be quite cautious, it's its weakest part of its journey through the sky, but it actually is in an opposition with Jupiter. And as I said to you, Jupiter is very, very influential this month. So if we're wanting to relate to someone, perhaps around a property matter, perhaps it's around our family life, there could be a sense that things are on the up. And part of the reason for that is if you look at the position of Mercury, Mercury's in a direct right angle with Jupiter. Now, if you are someone who has your own small enterprise, that's a very helpful link. Jupiter in Cancer is exalted, but it is asking us to be in touch with how we feel. Mercury in Libra can be more detached. A bit of a balance between the two could be good if you're a home worker or you want to share ideas you've got and you need to connect to some influential people. But one of the tricks of this month, and it really is shown by that particular aspect, is definitely not to overpromise, because if we end up under delivering, that can have an impact on our credibility. But having the moon in Capricorn in an opposition with Jupiter is ordinarily a very buoyant combination. But here I feel that although Jupiter can push the moon to see the bright side, the moon's just staying in touch with that a little bit more realistic part of its nature. But you'll see the moon is actually very much in touch with the nodal axis as we come into this month. It's a sextile to the North Node, a trine to the South Node. The North Node in Pisces, as we come into October, continues to encourage us not to be fearful of being in touch with how we feel, listening to our instincts, following our hunches. Because Neptune and Saturn burst into the fiery Aries earlier this year, in a way, perhaps the North Node didn't quite get as much time to push us and encourage us to embrace those principles of instinct. Now Saturn's back in the sign of Pisces and will be followed by Neptune on the 22nd, coming back into the sign for one last sweep through to the 26th of January next year. And then that completes its entire 160-year cycle. So if we think back, it will have last been in the sign of Aries around about before that brief sojourn this year, about 150 years ago, because we have to take into account the start point but also the exit point. So we're really being encouraged, despite the more cautious energy of the moon in Capricorn, to stay in touch with those senses. And yet we have that very airy energy in Libra, which can be about discussion, can be about the flow of information, can be about trying to get the midpoint between what we want in ties but what other people want and expect from us. So I feel that what the moon in Capricorn is saying to us all is make sure we keep it real. Because although Jupiter and Mercury in a square can make us very enthusiastic, and the moon and Jupiter in opposition can add even more buoyancy to the mix, I think that finding a balance between our earthly needs, the moon in Capricorn, but listening to those instincts, the North Node in Pisces, really critical as we come into this month. And I think that is going to be a backdrop that goes through right to the end of October. But as we come into this month, as I mentioned, if you are someone who has your own small business or you want to reach people, it's going to be important to, yes, charm and diplomacy are very important, especially with the energy of Libra, but that Jupiter position is also saying to show a bit of humanity, very important. That actually could be quite compelling. But on the 6th, Mercury is going to be moving out of the logical sign of Libra and dive in deep into the penetrative sign of Scorpio. This is where we all collectively put on our detective's max. It gives us an opportunity to really analyse in a very penetrative way anything to do with long-term financial planning, shared resources. So it may be that we have certain things in place for our future well-being that we could tweak in some way to squeeze a little bit more out of our assets. Also, that 8th house energy can be very evocative if you are interested in things like personal development, psychology, understanding what's not necessarily obvious, because Mercury in Scorpio is very much the investigator. If you do enjoy watching those TV programs, those detective or crime series where they use different modern techniques to solve old crimes, you could find with Mercury in Scorpio that your interest in those is piqued even more. But as Mercury travels forwards, it is going to start to forge a very powerful link from the middle of the month to Mars. Mars is the traditional ruler of the sign of Scorpio and will be in Scorpio for the whole of this month. What a no-nonsense combination that is. So I'm going to share a bit more about that later on. But we do get a test around any kind of relationship on the 7th. The full moon in the opposite sign of Aries. Aries energy, of course, is about initiation. Can be about instinct. It's a fire sign, wants to get on the front foot. If a relationship has not really got a real sense of purpose over the next couple of weeks, that could be something that comes up. There isn't any direct challenge to the position of the sun or the moon from any other players, not in a really notable way. But what we need to do with a full moon where the sun and the moon are effectively in competition is try to find a way to get a balance, because the sun in Libra is in its it's not its strongest location. Sometimes we have to be a bit braver to say no and set our boundaries, because it's not just about tuning into others and understanding what they need. We need to make sure we get what we need from it as well. So that's a full moon which encourages us all to get that balance better aligned. But on the 13th, Venus moves back into its home sign of Libra. It's going to be there through to November the 6th. And to be honest, that is a delicious transit. Venus here really helps us to try to celebrate the things we have in common rather than focusing on what's not quite right. However, the link with Uranus and Pluto, which I mentioned before, is a dazzling one. So if you're lucky enough to have some kind of meeting, could be completely spontaneous, but you do feel that you can just be yourself. The energy just flows, particularly around conversation, whether it is a business meeting, friendship, whether it is someone you encounter where you just feel that magnetism. It could be very exciting. But on the 14th, Pluto, the tiny but powerful power broker of the Zodiac, completes its 5-month annual retrograde. It's inverted 2.5 degrees since the early part of May. It's still in the sign of Aquarius, and it's still going to be very influential right throughout this month in its link with Uranus, and then once Venus comes into the mix as well. But remember that developing news story with Mercury, moving forwards from the middle of the month, however much the charm of Venus is going to play a role, I think it's important to understand that the sign of Aquarius, where Pluto completes that retrograde, Pluto is about the collective, but the sign of Aquarius is about us as a community. It's about us collectively. So Pluto going forwards, but then Mercury picking up speed. Mercury clashes with Pluto from the 6th. There could be some powerful conversations around that time, but then goes into that very potent conjunction with Mars, which could be very, very direct. If you are someone who's got a business idea that you're really excited about, you want to drive it forwards, your determination and willpower to do so can be absolutely incredible. But also I feel that that combination can push back a little bit on the delicacy and, dare I say, even potential for superficiality that we can get with Venus in Libra. It's a lovely place to have Venus in Libra, I must stress that, but it can at times be a bit too caught up in how things look. What the guttural energy of Mercury and Mars together, it's very impatient. It's got a sense of urgency. If you did encounter someone that you really were drawn to, you could really connect in such a potent and magnetic way. But that brings us to the new moon of the 21st. Now, the annual Libran new moon is ordinarily a great opportunity for the following 4 weeks to really set our stall out, set our intentions about who we want to bring into our world, who perhaps we need to move on from if it isn't working so well. But this is quite a complex new moon, to be honest, because it's so late in the sign of Libra. It's going to be squaring up with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, which may be travelling forwards. So it's possible that however much we want to try and work with people in a collaborative and even-handed way, with that Mercury-Mars conjunction, I feel some very urgent energies can come into the open. So no amount of trying to cover up what's not quite working. If a tie is bumping along the bottom, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in a very straightforward way, particularly if there are issues to do with control, leverage, coercion. These may seem strong words, but even in very subtle ways, these things can go on in all sorts of interactions. If someone is unavailable or doesn't give us their attention, that's as much as a use of power as actually connecting and expressing honestly what their challenge may be with us. So just be aware of the ways that people don't say things by omission that still are really saying something. And that's the power dynamic of Pluto applying to that new moon. So if there is a weak relationship, it's going to be incredibly tested at the heart of this month. Now the 22nd, as I mentioned before, does see Neptune inverting in its retrograde back into the sign of Pisces, which it's the modern ruler of. It left here on the 30th of March. I feel Neptune's conjunction with Saturn this year has had quite the impact on a lot of our physical but also psychological energy. It's not that we've been ill as such, it's been more that we've been soaking up things around us, and that's perhaps had an impact and made us feel not quite as energetic as we'd perhaps like. Neptune going back into its water sign, it's a very, very potent energy, Neptune, and I think it's one of the most underestimated of all the planetary players. But it certainly has a chance through to the end of January next year to just help us think about the big cycle that we've been going through. Neptune in Pisces can be about compassion, it can be about healing, but it can also be about innate escapism, it can also be about addiction, it can be about where we in some ways delude ourselves about the reality, and it is going to be still pretty close to Saturn. So we're really being asked not to ignore the psychological domain, and remember that's a big theme at the start of this month with that North Node. However much Jupiter is trying to elevate our mood at the start of this month, and in the square with Mercury, then the developing square week 3 with the Sun, we need to keep it real. So we need to be protective, in touch with our instincts, trying to maintain our stability and security in a practical, physical way. The moon at the start of the month in Capricorn. So Neptune joining back up with Saturn just encourages us, if we have been distracted by what's going on, if there are parts of our inner world that we can work on, I think the second half of this month can be incredibly powerful, because going back to that Jupiter square with Saturn, Jupiter moved into Cancer early June, clashed on the 15th. If you recall, I think it was the 4th time in a year. Previously, of course, it had been in Mercury, where it detrimented, with Saturn back in Pisces at that time. But we're getting a repetition, but this time in a trine. So if we really invest, even if we're dealing with these complex relationship issues, in our senses, we're guided by our inner voice. We don't let anyone ghost us, because our instincts are telling us something from what they're physically relating to us. Remember the potential superficiality of the charm of Venus in Libra. That's going to help us to navigate all of this much, much better. Then the Sun burst into the sign of Scorpio. It's going to immediately come into a very challenging right angle with Pluto. And it's a kind of echo of the new moon, because the new moon obviously was just a couple of days before. So it's an ongoing energy. The energy of Scorpio can be about where we're most devoted, where we're most invested. It can be where we transition, where changes occur. And of course, Pluto can be very much about that as well. So some of the relationship issues that can come up at this part of the month may be around a friendship or a group situation, where maybe the dynamics are not particularly free. There could be some hard to even talk about, because it could be that you just get a hunch, a sense that some people want to manipulate the vibe. And if you feel those energies are impacting on you, have the confidence to break free. And that's one of the reasons that I think the Sun square to Jupiter just before it moves into the sign of Scorpio can actually be a good thing, because of course Jupiter can be about freedom, but it's also important to understand that sometimes we can free ourselves from something, but it may be something that's very valuable, so it can be quite complex. I feel that combination between Mercury and Mars helps us to have the confidence to cut through whatever games, however people are responding or denying how we feel, or if we just feel they don't even do that, but energetically we feel drained by certain alliances. I think the last 10 days of this month is pushing us in a big way to actualize the benefits of Jupiter in Cancer, which is to have faith. It's to have the belief that even if we're leaving something that isn't working very well for us, it can bring something else into our world which will be much better. So as we come into the end of this month, the angle between the water players of Mars in Scorpio and Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn and nearly Neptune, just a little broader, in Pisces, gives us an opportunity to actually work with that feeling energy and just go with any evolutions that are going on in our situation, safe in the knowledge that Jupiter in Cancer really is protecting us if we can trust the process. It's really important to know that. Now, just as the month comes to a close, Mercury darts into a sign it's detrimented in, the sign of Sagittarius. But I think symbolically wise, this is very powerful, because Mercury here loves the big picture. It can be quite enthusiastic about different knowledge and very open-minded, but it does go into an immediate opposition with the electric Uranus as the month comes to a close. So whatever complexities we're dealt with this month, or we have to work through, be it work relationships, perhaps it's the environment around our social interactions, could be around the family unit, whether it is in a one-to-one tie. If you have or found yourself or do find yourself needing to use the directness of Mercury and Mars's conjunction, and then as Mercury moves into the sign of what essentially is liberty and freedom, goes opposite the planet, which is very resistant to any kind of control, that could just be the perfect way to exit something that just has served its purpose. But I want to say this to you. This month of complex relationship interactions can also serve to reinforce those ties that are truly worthwhile, that are truly meaningful. But like everything in life, we have to work at it. And because the Sun in Libra is not at its greatest, and because the month starts with the Moon also afflicted in detriment in Capricorn, we're going to have to work for what we want this month. That means telling people what we need, being clear about our boundaries. It means owning and valuing who we are and what we contribute. So if we change our inner energy, that's our relationship with ourselves, the energy coming to us can change too. But it's also having the courage to make some very big calls as the month goes on that may require us to be much more direct, even all the way to being brutally honest, almost ruthless. But there is a reason for this, because Scorpionic energy is naturally about transformation, but for everything that comes to a close, there is a new dawn, and that's the wonderful process of life. So whatever's going on for us this month, whether it's that relationship with ourselves, relationship with others, colleagues, family members, a partner, our children, as the month comes to a close, I feel if we can just have faith in the process with that amazing grand water trine, and then also exercise our right to have complete freedom if something really isn't working. That electric, impulsive energy between Mercury and Uranus as the cosmic curtain comes down on October is a great chance to celebrate and stay in touch with our right and even need for our personal agency and independence, even where we're collaborating really successfully with other people. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. I'm going to be sharing the natal chart at the start of October for each of them, but just to say, if you've yet to watch my year 2026 astrology overview or your deep dive for each of the individual signs, please see the link beneath this video. And if you'd like to order your year 2026 personal natal transits report now, I'll give you the rest of this year free. You'll get 30% off if you also get my life roadmap report. Totally unique to each of us, these charts, but also you'll get your free gift of your general, love, Vedic and Chinese year 2026 booklets as well, just to help to guide you next year. Please see the link below for more. Welcome Aries to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some of the standout news of this month to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the start of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole month. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Your ruler Aries is Mars. Mars in your sign is very much about initiation, courage, action, having the confidence to take that first step forwards. But all through this month, Mars is in a much deeper, more psychological, transformational part of your scope. And that is Scorpio, which it also rules traditionally. That can stir up some deep desires, and that mystery is going to be at the heart of this month's story. But also relationship matters are to the fore. Questions can be asked on the back of the Aries full moon of the 7th. The new moon of the 21st, ordinarily each year, is a chance for you to set your intentions to bring good things your way. And you can do that this year, but there are some planetary caveats that I need to unpack for you. Neptune, the planet of dreams and artistry, creativity, has been in your sign since the end of March, but is going to say au revoir briefly on the 22nd, inversing back into the most psychological part of your scope, joining up with Saturn, which reversed out of your sign on the 1st of September. What does this mean? I'm going to share about this too. As the month goes on, the Sun makes the transition to join up with Mars and also Mercury in that passionate sign of Scorpio, but it is going to go into a mighty, monumental clash with Pluto, the planet of power, but also of transformation. What's the implications of that? But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person. But understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. And you can see we have the Sun and also Mercury in Libra. The Sun in Libra is not its strongest place. It's known as being in its fall. So if you want something around a relationship situation this month, it's suggesting this is going to take skill and perseverance. But Mercury being there, the planet of communication, can be a real asset, because Mercury helps us to be a bit more detached and logical, not take things quite so personally. But you'll see the position of Mercury to Jupiter, the planet of fortune, right at the start of this month is a square. But this is one of those squares which can be a challenging influence and stressful influence in astrology, which does have some opportunities. Particularly if you're trying to relate to a family member about something that's important to you, or an emotional component in an existing relationship. But I think that square, great if you have a home-based business that you want to connect to more people. Your enthusiasm can be infectious all through this month. Not so good if your expectations are very high. So important to be very realistic. You'll also see that the position of the moon is right at the top of the chart. That means your emotions are going to be close to the surface this month. Even if you see yourself as being quite a private person, I feel there will be times when you just sense other people know what you're thinking. That's not necessarily the case, but it may just feel like that. But just notice the moon is opposite Jupiter. If you are wanting to do something around your home, improve it, perhaps move, downsize, upsize, expand, perhaps redecorate, the opposition with Jupiter can give you a sense of what's possible. But I think it is also important to know that all through this month, the reactions and interactions you have with others is really going to be at the root of the story. I'm now going to go through each of the key influences in detail to give you a clear timeline and picture of what to expect this month. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 Aries deep dive forecast, please see the link within this video. If you click on it, it will take you directly to there. So as you come into this month, we have that buoyant energy between Mercury and Jupiter, but asking you to be realistic. You do have the moon in a very practical, cautious part of your scope, but that's making you think very much about your connection to the world at large. But as I mentioned in my introduction, Neptune is going to invert out of your sign, but you can see that Saturn, right at the start of the month, is in that 12th house. And between now and the middle of February next year, it may be that you're going to have to clear up some loose ends that are still outstanding. And it may be about a relationship matter that this shows itself, particularly as Saturn and Mercury, as Mercury moves forwards, come into a stressful quincunx, which is quite a complex influence from the 3rd to the 6th. You may find that if you're trying to get to know someone new, for example, that maybe some old events that occurred to you could be an inhibitor and stopping you quite flowing in the moment. But on the 6th, Mercury, the planet of communication, dives deep into the sign of Scorpio. If you are someone who wants to make the most of your resources, as Mercury starts to align with Mars, which builds up from the 11th through to the 23rd, but is very, very tight on the 20th, that's an opportunity for you to be very determined, especially if you're negotiating a financial situation, trying to squeeze more from your assets. But if there is someone you're finding mesmerizing from a relationship viewpoint, Mercury moving to join up with Mars later this month will certainly give you a kind of impulse, an impulse that may bring out that part of your nature that likes to just go for it, and that can give you a sense of really feeling alive. But in existing relationships, there is a very powerful full moon in your sign on the 7th, which suggests that if things are out of kilter, for example, if you feel that you do more than other people, particularly at home, people are taking you for granted, that Aries full moon is asking you to set your boundaries. And I think Mercury and Mars, as they align by the 20th, can make you much punchier about putting across your message. Now on the 13th, Venus, the relator, moves home into the sign of Libra. Do you know, if you are wanting to get to know someone new, that's a magical transition that goes on through to November the 6th, but particularly because of Mars and Mercury being in the 8th house, because Venus in the 7th house can be very diplomatic, charming, flirty, likes harmony, but maybe doesn't quite go for it. But with that combination, if there is someone who comes up on your celestial orbit this month, I think it's a combination of lust, but also using your words with skill, which could be very hard to resist. On the 14th, however, Pluto, the planet of transformation, which is linking fabulously well to Venus and also Uranus at the heart of this month, which could set up a completely unexpected, almost karmic encounter. Pluto does go direct. It has been retracing its steps since early May. If you have been a little bit unsure about your long-term future, I think from here on in, things could be clarified, but I still think with Neptune returning to your sign on the 22nd to join up with Saturn, there may still be some things that you need to just tidy up that have been ongoing for some time, perhaps of a more psychological nature, that will then help you to focus on that future plan in a much more compelling way. The 21st I mentioned is a new moon. Each year, that's usually your glorious opportunity to springboard relationship hopes. But this one is so late in the sign of Libra that it's actually squaring up with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. If you're in a relationship where you feel that there isn't the real potential to grow together, this new moon is pushing you over the next month to make a decisive decision. The 22nd, with Neptune returning to your sign, just know it takes 165 years to go for its entire cycle. So around about 150 years ago was the last time that it approached your sign. It will come back to Aries on the 26th of January, and that will be a completely new epoch for you. The 23rd, however, the Sun bursts into Scorpio, joining up with Mercury and Mars. It's a really exciting transition. The Sun here is about understanding what's not necessarily obvious. It can bring up the opportunity to think about business, entrepreneurship, shared finances or investment, things like legacies. That's all the practical stuff. But it can also, particularly with Mercury and with Mars in that very tight conjunction on the 20th, if there is someone you're finding very, very alluring, it could get red hot. But if there is a relationship that someone's not tuning into how you're feeling, particularly on the back of that new moon, I feel you can be much more forthright in telling them why you're not happy. As the month comes to a close, Mercury, however, moves into your fellow fire sign of Sagittarius. The intensity of this month could come to a close with you needing some kind of break, distraction, or some kind of freedom, independence, completely understandable. If you do find yourself wanting to head off somewhere on the spur of the moment as October comes to a close, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But there is a big picture aspect developing too in the last week. If you're an Aries person who's comfortable with the psychological domain, the combination between Saturn, Jupiter and Mars as this month closes can be fantastic for helping you to dive deep and understand the emotional component of any situation that may have proved challenging for quite some time. See it as an opportunity to release yourself with the knowledge and insights that you're gaining. But in a very profound way, Aries, I think this is a month which is asking you this question. Are the relationships you're enjoying at the moment giving you an equal return to the investment you're putting in? If the answer is no, and it's quite a big no, and there's not really the latitude to work on it, I feel by the end of this month you will be taking very decisive action, be it at work, be it in a business partnership, be it around a friendship, family affair, or perhaps even a close romantic relationship. Welcome Taurus to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the beginning of the month, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole of the period. I'll then go through each of the key influences in detail to give you a frame-by-frame clear picture of what to expect. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now, but also please click or tap the bell notification symbol. The first 2/3 of this month do put quite an emphasis on life's practicalities, which doesn't sound like much fun. But you know, actually, if you come into this month with a positive intent and determination, there's a lot you can change in terms of those everyday details, which does actually make your situation that much better. But I think one of the things that's going to be important to you as this month goes on, Taurus, is collaboration. But it's going to be collaboration with a purpose. You want people to be as committed as you are to them or whatever you're jointly working on. And if they're not, the last third of this month is going to flag up a much more passionate and intense part of your nature that could see some real new beginnings around all sorts of connections, perhaps even some exciting relationship possibilities too. On the screen now is your event chart right at the beginning of the month. As ever, we need to be mindful of the sun and the moon, the two luminaries. The sun for you is in that 6th house. In the sign of Libra, that's very much about balance, fairness, communication. So I feel the themes for you can be you thinking about perhaps your fueling, what you're eating and drinking, the amount of exercise you're getting, the sleep and rest, but also things like your everyday life structure. If things could be a bit more precise, Mercury being in the sign of Libra too gives you a great chance to grapple with the details. But will you want to? Because Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is in a square with Mercury as you come into this month, and there's part of you that could be innately very optimistic about what you can achieve, particularly if you're someone who works in some kind of sectoral role where you provide particular services and you've got a passion for that. Because Venus, your ruler, is in a very playful part of your situation at the start of this month. Yes, it's in the serious Virgo, but for you, this helps you to engage with what you need to do in terms of those practicalities, but find some ways to make it fun. Also, if you see the position of Mars, Mars is in your 7th house, critical for relationships, but in a very positive link with the Sun. If you can find those ways to collaborate, you can do so with a lot of passion. However, I want to make you mindful of the position of Pluto. It's right at the top of your chart. He is going to be ending a long 5-month retrograde at the middle of this month, but he does retain a square with Mars, which really brought the celestial curtain down on September. If there has been some kind of power battle going on in any kind of relationship, however subtle it may be, if you feel that someone's trying to in some ways make you beholden, you feel at work that whatever you do never seems to come up to standard, that could be something that's quite triggering this month. Also, the moon's in the part of your chart that's making you much more mindful of what's fair, and obviously the sign of Libra is about fairness too. So fairness about those practical parts of your situation where you're showing dedication, where you're being supportive of others, where you're being very conscientious. If you're doing all those things and it's celebrated and appreciated, not a problem at all. But if you're doing all those things and don't really feel seen or heard, as this month goes on, as I will share with you, you're going to push back. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far, all of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. So on the 6th of this month, Mercury moves out of that brittle 6th house, but into the 7th house, joining up with Mars. Now they're going to start to align from the 11th onwards, and they're going to come into an exact conjunction on the 20th, and that's really significant because Mars in the 7th house doesn't really like to take a step backwards. So if someone wants to be combative or forceful, we're not going to be steamrolled over. And as Mercury moves forwards, although Mercury in the 7th house is great to sharpen up our listening skills, I think you're going to want to be heard, and heard loud and clear as this month goes on. If you do feel that something around your work is out of kilter, it will come up on the full moon of the 7th. Watch out for kind of office politics and stuff like that, because that is a possibility. But the 13th sees your ruler Venus move into its other home sign of Libra. Libra, obviously, with Venus is about harmony. So you're looking for harmony in the sense that this month's story is about feeling respected and appreciated. And Venus does forge an immediately positive link to Uranus and Pluto. You could get a job offer around this part of the month. Maybe if you work for yourself, a new contractual possibility, and it could come from out of nowhere, but actually be very exciting for you. But what we are going to see with Pluto going direct on the 14th, it went retrograde on the 4th of May. If you have been unsure about your goals and ambitions in the interim months, I think those can be clarified for you as this month goes on. The 21st, however, is a new moon. A great opportunity, usually the new moon in Libra, to be very virtuous and conscientious about your health and well-being over the following month. And you can do that. It's just, I think, if there are a lot of worldly pressures on you, particularly to do with your job, that may be something that weighs on that. The 22nd, however, sees Neptune, the planet of dreams, move back into your sector of friendship, where Saturn returned on the 1st of September. Now, through the latter part of this year and through to the 14th of February next year, when Saturn, after Neptune at the end of January, returns to Aries, that's going to be a key time for the psychological part of your situation. But between now and then, you may be asking some serious questions about some of your friendships. The 23rd, however, is really exciting. The Sun makes its way into your opposite sign of Scorpio. But because you already have Mercury and Mars in that location, remember coming into an exact conjunction on the 20th, your relationship sector really lights up in the last third of this month. If that's a part of life that's intriguing and interesting to you, the switch from those more practical things early in the month can be something that delights you. But there is a converse dimension. I feel all this energy in your 7th house can make you much feistier if you feel people have been taking you for granted. It can be a time when you really set your boundaries. Generally speaking, I feel that Taurus people can be very mellow, easy going, but when you're stirred, you can be much more forceful. And I feel that that part of your nature is going to be amplified in the second half of this month. But if you are looking to bring some romantic action into your life, certainly you're going to have a lot more confidence to step outside your comfort zone to try to make things happen. But as the month comes to a close, Scorpio, there is a grand water trine that's being forged. As much as Saturn and Neptune have over the last couple of years in particular, since Saturn moved into Pisces initially, been asking some big questions about your long-term future and some of the players within your world, Neptune had been asking those questions for much further back through to 2012. I feel there may have been some times when it's all felt a bit wounding, a bit attritional. At the end of this month, because Saturn, Mars and Jupiter, the planets of fortune, are all aligning in such a constructive way, if there is someone that you really enjoy being with, maybe it's through a shared project, interest, a passion, maybe it is just in a social circle, but the energy around that, if it's really sincere and meaningful, can actually be something that really brings a lot of blessings into your situation. And as we come to the end of this month, that part of you that really wants to know where you stand, which is a big part of your nature, that can be amplified in a very constructive way. But I think it is a little bit black and white. If people are not meeting your standards, I think you could surprise yourself by being a lot more assertive this month. But if there are people who are not appreciating how much dedication and effort you're putting in, you need to ask yourself the question, is it viable to continue to overreach to please them when they're not respecting what you're giving back? So as the month comes to a close, a much more feisty, assertive and combative side of your nature is definitely going to be coming to the fore. There may be a little bit of nervous tension as the cosmic curtain comes down on the month, because Mercury moves forwards out of your 7th house into the 8th, going opposite Uranus. You may have a snap decision to make around a financial matter, but equally it could be one that brings a massive unexpected opportunity. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth October horoscope forecast. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with. Then on screen, your event chart right at the beginning of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through all the developing influences in detail, frame by frame, to give you a clear picture of what this month holds. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now. Please also click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Your ruler, of course, is Mercury. Mercury is going to be dazzling us in 3 different locations this month. I will unpack that for you. But Mercury is also going to align in a very influential way with the planet of assertion and thrust, Mars, which peaks on the 20th, What's the significance of that? You start this month, Gemini, with the Sun, but also Mercury, your ruler, in a very playful, self-expressive part of your situation. And that holds real promise. But if you recall, on the 1st of September, Saturn, the planet of structure, but also of limitation, moved back into the worldly part of your scope. And you may have actually been experiencing quite a lot of pressure, perhaps at work, responsibility. So giving yourself permission to have some fun may not be a completely straightforward thing this month, but I will explain why. Now, Venus is the planet of relating and is going to be moving into a delightful location for you mid-month, and also sparks a marvellous opportunity. What's that about? We also have a new moon on the 21st in your fellow ARIES sign of Libra. New moons are usually a chance to set our intentions. This one in the 5th house can be about sociability, creativity, self-expression, playfulness, even romance. What's this new moon about this year? But as this month goes on, there is a growing focus on a more practical part of your life. What's the implications of that? Because if you're someone who's very, very conscientious, there is another part of you that comes from Pluto going direct at the heart of this month, which could be a little resistant or even resentful about some of those everyday demands that maybe that people have for you. But by the end of this month, as Mercury moves into your opposite sign, what's the implications for your relationships? Because it is going to be forging an exact opposition with Uranus early in Gemini. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart. We always have to be mindful of the two luminaries. So the moon is in the practical sign of Capricorn, but you can see the sun in Libra. The 5th house is a lovely place for the sun to be. It's a kind of Leonian energy, but the moon in Capricorn is just emerging from a quarter moon it shared with the sun as September came to a close. So as you come into this month, I feel if there is anyone who kind of has some expectations around you, perhaps even is a little bit possessive, or maybe feels controlling, that might be something that's on your mind. But for sure, with Mercury also along with the sun in your 5th house, on the face of it, it's a chance for you to sparkle, and there's nothing like Gemini sparkle. I feel that Mercury being in the 5th house can help your sense of fun and mischief really to be lit up. But you can see that Jupiter, the planet of plenty, is squaring up with your ruler as we go into this month. And I feel if you're someone who has got brilliant ideas and you're wanting to do something with them that's perhaps more speculative, that's an aspect that can really whet your appetite. And with the moon and Jupiter in an opposition, T-squaring back to Mercury, maybe you can get caught up in that energy, and want to be more enterprising as you come into this month, whether it is around your social life and interaction, whether it is around your love, a love attraction, or it is around some kind of business or financial idea you have. But I just want to make you aware that as Mercury heads into the month, it is going to be forging a quincunx with Saturn. So whatever ideas you've got, you really need to think very carefully about how they'll be perceived by anyone in a position of influence or authority. So if you're pitching an idea to an investor or a bank, for example, or you're trying to get your parents hooked in to your enthusiasm, just be aware that they might not share quite as much as your sparkle, and that could feel a little deflating. But I think essentially Jupiter squaring off to Mercury at the start of this month sets the tone for the whole month. And if you do have some spare cash, and whether you want to get yourself some nice clothes, whether you want to start preparing for Christmas and be very generous to people that you care for, or it is something that is inspiring you to be a bit more risk-taking, there is that there, but you're also being asked to be very cautious with resources as well. Because if we go back to when Jupiter moved out of your sign early in June, it clashed straight away with Saturn in that sector of responsibility. So Jupiter visits each sign around every 12 or 13 years. It's not an exact cycle, but when Jupiter moves into one's second house, the chances are it can bring some extra potential for earning money. And that is possible this year, but I think you're going to get the benefits more next year with Jupiter in Gemini because of the coming retrograde. And the key is that I feel that not to be over optimistic is going to be an important part of the journey of this month. And what's going to help you really to be very focused on the details. I think details at times can bore you a little bit, but on the 6th, Mercury moves into Scorpio. Here Mercury is very penetrative. It's great for looking at things like crunching numbers, doing some market research, being very exacting. Now it may be that you do have that in your nature naturally, that that more flitty side that tends to be characterized in of you is not actually the case, because as Mercury moves forwards this month, it's actually going to become razor sharp but very thrusting in a combination with Mars, and that's going to help you to almost like puncture through any situation in a very, very powerful way. So even if there is part of you that comes into this month with a high level of optimism and wanting to do something a bit more free-spirited, I feel as the month goes on, you're going to show a lot more capacity to grapple with the details. But on the 7th, we do have a full moon. So full moon in Aries, and for you that can be about your social interactions, but also your long-term plan. It doesn't have any afflictions, this full moon, from other players. So what I think it could throw up for you is making some choices over time management, and that time management can be around who you spend time with in terms of people. There may be some people that you want to spend more time with and some people less, because remember that quarter moon that brought the curtain down on September. It maybe made you more aware if someone around you was a bit cloying, a bit too wanting of your attention, and that may have felt rather closing in and inhibiting. So just be conscious that you may want to create a bit of space from that particular full moon. But on the 13th, Venus, the relator, which starts this month for you in an area which can make you or give you the desire to do some home decoration. If your creativity comes from some crafting or making, perhaps that's where you see an opportunity to make some more money. But Venus moves into a much more playful, romantic, glamorous part of your scope right at the heart of this month, and forges a dazzling link with Uranus in your sign and Pluto, but Pluto goes direct on the following day. If you do connect with someone at the heart of this month, and the energy between you is very free-spirited, you can have a laugh, you feel you can be yourself, but also you can feel that they can understand your qualities and be attracted to them, but also there's something that you can both transform through. Something very exciting could develop from that, I feel. If you have felt that something you wanted to expand around has been rather inhibited since the early part of May, it might have been because of Pluto's retrograde, so that loosens up. But from the 15th through to the 26th, peaking on the 20th, Mercury advances forwards and meets up with Mars. Now Mars starts this month and continues right through it in the other zodiac sign that it rules of Scorpio. So it can give you more stamina this month, which is very useful. But of course Mars in Scorpio can be very direct, all the way to blunt, and it can be very desirous. If you need to have a discussion with someone and you need to punch across the detail or the facts or your point of view, your perspective, you can do so with fantastic clarity, but also conviction and authority. It really can see you coupling the playful, creative stuff of the Libran energy with being much more businesslike. So that's lovely. The 21st, however, does see a new moon in Libra. So the new moon at the 21st nominally gives you a chance to showcase your talents, creativity and flair, Gemini. Just be aware that this year it is in a complex relationship with both Saturn and Pluto. So it's not going to be quite so free-spirited, but then quite quickly on the 23rd, the Sun is making its way into the deep Scorpio. The 22nd, however, sees Neptune step back into the 10th house, where it had been since full-time 212 until the 30th of March this year. If you did go through a period of evolution around your work, maybe you worked in a care or a healing sector, maybe as a psychic. Neptune in the 10th house, very, very vivid energy. Through to the end of January, it's going to complete its entire cycle, which then begins again. It takes 165 years, but we have to take into account the time it's actually in a sign, but it will come back to Aries, and Saturn will return to Aries on the 14th of February next year. But in the interim, from now through to then, some big questions are going to come up about your career, about how much responsibility you have, how much you want to take on. If you're someone who really wants to seize a golden prize, raise your profile, if you can use the flair and imagination of Neptune, but the industry and application of Saturn, that's going to be very helpful. Because the ironic thing, Gemini, is that when Jupiter moved into that second house in early June, I don't feel that you got the benefits financially because of Saturn blocking it. And I think that as this month draws on, you are going to have a chance to start reaping some benefits from a lot of hard work you've been doing, probably quite historically, but maybe very intensely over the last couple of years, since Saturn moved to the top of your chart in March 2023. So if you've really been pitching things in a different way, you've stepped into the limelight more, you've used the fact that Saturn can be about spiritual transformation. It's not just about where we're going to encounter limitations and frustrations. But before that, we had the Sun joining up with Mercury and Mars on the 23rd. But that clashes with Pluto in a square. So for you, that scorpionic energy, that's 6th house, 9th house energy, is where you could feel a bit conflicted by where you have to be very dedicated and attending to the details, and there's another part of you that wants to be that free spirit. So that could come up then. But as we come into the end of this month, as Jupiter steps forwards and Mars steps forwards, we get a grand water trine. And all that hard work that you've put in over the last couple of years, even if you've had to put up with some frustrations professionally, even if some things have seemed out of your reach, even if some people you've encountered professionally have been really, really tough, there's a chance for you to have some kind of fundamental breakthrough. Do believe that is possible, particularly with Mercury then spinning as the month draws to a close into your opposite sign, because your ability to connect with people is really going to be fundamentally amplified as this month closes. So your mind energies, your communicational energies, can work in tandem with those worldly energies, because although it's a water ground trine, for you personally, Saturn and Neptune 10, that's very Capricorn, Jupiter 2, very Taurus, and the Scorpio energy for you, very Virgo. So that could see some kind of big advance forwards, but it could come quite quickly, and there may be some rapid discussions, and you may have to make some big and important decisions. But if you can marry that part of you that can be fun, mischievous, very, very quick-witted, with a preparedness to grapple with the details, be very hard-working, and really dedicate yourself, even if at times, particularly with the move of the Sun into Scorpio, it jars a little bit in terms of your free time. Stay with the program, as they say, because it could be very helpful to you. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive Gemini forecast, please see the link within this video. You can click on that and it will take you to it. Welcome Cancer to your October monthly forecast. I'm going to share some standout details to begin with. Then on screen, your event chart right at the start of the month, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through all the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to expect. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive, and do so now. But please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. As you come into this new month, Jupiter, the planet of plenty, continues to be in your sign. But if we go back to when Jupiter first arrived or at the end of the first week of June, it was immediately conflicted by the planet of limitation, Saturn. The big irony of this month, Cancer, is you have an enormous opportunity through the last 10 days to actually make these two very contrasting influences come to life in a very positive way for you. But in the early part of this month, I think there is going to be a big focus on your home, emotional and family situation. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far, all of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm showing that event chart. So there's Jupiter in your sign, but you can see that Jupiter is in a square with Mercury. Mercury in Libra can be detached. It's about communication, of course, but for you, it's the 4th house. So what you're looking for is balance in your home and emotional life. But if you look on the other side of the heavens from Jupiter, your ruler, the moon, is opposing Jupiter, which actually is a very bubbly influence, but it's not in its favourite location. It's known as being detrimented in Capricorn, and they're both linking back to the position of Mercury. So how you're thinking or how you're feeling and communicating that is going to be a big part of this month's story, particularly in the early weeks. If there is something that you want to change around where you live, whether it's move or redecorate or start a home-based business, I think on the whole this is a very helpful start for the month for you. But the moon in your 7th house suggests you need to be attuned to how other people are viewing what you're trying to achieve. And one of the challenges with Mercury in the fourth house is that we can think a lot, but find it a bit more difficult to actually say how we feel. But if you are a creative, the fact the Sun starts this month in a semi-sextile to Mars in your sister water sign of Scorpio is very, very helpful. Because if there is something you want to change around your home, but if you are a crafter or a maker, or you want to run a home-based business or offer services in your locality, that combination has a lot of thrust and spark, so that's really helpful. Now, as we go into this month on the 6th, Mercury, the planet of communication, moves into the next zodiac sign of Scorpio, where of course you have Mars. Now, Mercury here, even though it's deep and penetrative in Scorpio, for you, it's going to see you feel a bit more outgoing, because I think in the fourth house, as I mentioned, it can make it more difficult to verbalize how we feel. But on the 7th, we do have a full moon. It's a full moon that's going to see your emotions very, very close to the surface. If you're not enjoying your professional situation, I think the issue is going to come sharply into focus over the next couple of weeks, to be honest. On the 13th, however, Venus, which starts this month in an area which does give you an ability, if you can be in touch with how you feel, to articulate them with a degree of grace and charm, well, Venus moves to join up with the Sun and initially Mercury in that fourth house. So if there has been a delay around doing something to your home, perhaps decoratively or having people around, Venus moving into that area can be really good. But it also forges a very powerful link to Uranus and Pluto. You may find that you feel particularly nostalgic at the heart of this month. You may even have a desire to link with people from your past that you haven't had a connection with for some while, and something could move quite quickly in that regard. But from the 14th, Pluto does end its 5-month retrograde. Now, Pluto has been going backwards in a very potent part of your scope. If something has come to a close in your life, unexpectedly perhaps, since the early part of May, it may have been an area where you were actually quite invested, perhaps around your finances, perhaps it's been around a deep relationship, some kind of change or change within you has been very profound. Pluto going direct is not going to change the fact that through to 243, that there is going to be a lot of evolving alterations in your situation, because Pluto in the 8th house is just going to constantly be urging you to dive deep and understand in a much more profound way the inner machinations of your own emotions, but of those of others too. But from the 15th to the 26th is quite an intriguing part of the month for you personally, because what we have then, Cancer, is that Mercury is going to be applying to Mars in that 5th house of your chart, but they become exact on the 20th. Now, that's a combination with the potential to express ideas with a lot of conviction, maybe even a lot of enthusiasm, but certainly if you are someone who is or has got a lot of flair or artistry, or if there is someone really catching your attention romantically, the energy around that is very, very lively indeed, and that can create a sense of excitement, even though there is that tender energy at the root of your chart. Now, the new moon that occurs on the 21st, ordinarily each year, a Libra new moon for you is a chance to reset your inner world, anything to do with how you feel. And of course, that's a huge part of your being, because that's very moon led. It's very much about your senses, your environment. That has to feel right. If something isn't working for you in terms of your core existence, this new moon's asking you to really grapple with that. The 22nd, however, is intriguing. Neptune, the planet of dreams, moves back into your sister water sign of Pisces, joining up with Saturn. And through till the end of January will be in this area. Saturn emerges from Pisces in the middle of February, and they both align on the 18th of February in a very powerful way. And that could be when you start a new epoch in your life around your career or work. But if something has faltered recently, I feel what could come up between now and then is perhaps a need to grapple with freeing yourself from something that isn't working very well. And it could be over a point of principle, you know, if your philosophies don't quite match, perhaps a business you work in, perhaps in a friendship, perhaps your desire to have more time traveling or engaging with the interest that you find very personally uplifting, rather than being so focused on success in the practical world. These are things that are going to be very much part of your narrative through to then. And that's going to be accelerated by the 23rd when the Sun moves into Scorpio. Now, usually each year that is something to really savour for you, because it can help you to feel more outgoing. But this is a Sun that immediately comes into a bruising encounter with Pluto. If there is any kind of jealousy, control, restriction, leverage around any kind of relationship at all, it could come up. It may be over a financial situation. Perhaps you want to buy something, a partner's not in agreement. It could be that there's part of you that wants to be more speculative with your resources, but I wouldn't do that without checking things out in a very, very careful way. Do your research. Now, the 29th is going to see Mercury enter its third home of the month, moving into the sign of Sagittarius, which for you is very practical. But because it goes immediately opposite the retreating Uranus in a very psychological part of your scope, once again, I think this brings up this theme of wanting to create space from something that doesn't really fill your heart with passion, and it isn't really your sole purpose. So I think the early part of this month, to recap, is very much about that home emotional part of your situation. If you're working in an environment that doesn't feed your sense of comfort, you don't really relate to the people very well, you don't like the atmosphere, that's something you may have to grapple with. You could find that your home is quite the sanctuary this month, but I think as the month goes on, there's going to be more pushing towards reaching out, interacting with people, but about the things that you find really exciting. And there may be a need as the month goes on to liberate yourself from something, particularly professionally, which is not really creating much spark, excitement or enjoyment. So Cancer, please click on the link within this video and you can watch your deep dive for year 2026, which is now live. Welcome Leo to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some standout themes to begin with, then on screen your event chart right at the beginning of the month, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to look forward to this month. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive by doing so now. Please click or tap the bell notification symbol. As you come into this month, Leo, there are no players in your sign, but there is Pluto, the planet of transformation, change, power in the part of your situation to do with relationships. And Pluto is going to go direct at the heart of this month. Pluto has been in retrograde ever since the first week of May. If you have gone through some big, deep conversations or changes around key relationships during that time, it wouldn't be a surprise. But also at the heart of this month, Venus, the relator, moves to join in a wonderful connection with Pluto, but also the electric energies of Uranus. So even if there have been some very, very big conversations, perhaps maybe even major developments, there's a chance to start again, to re-spark your approach in your connections to others right at the heart of this month. But communication is important for us all, isn't it? All the time. And there are two lunations this month, the full moon of the 7th and the new moon of the 21st, that I need to share with you to explore how they're going to impact upon you. But as this month goes on, there is a greater emphasis on your home, emotions and family life. And there is the potential for some tension, to be honest, so I need to share exactly why that is. But as this month also comes to a close, Jupiter and Saturn, which when Jupiter first moved into Cancer in early June, came into immediate conflict in the middle of the month, they're actually coming into a great relationship as this month draws to a close. So I'm really excited to share that with you. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far, all of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart, and there you can see Pluto right on that 7th house cusp. That's because it's rewound 2.5 degrees from the maximum extension that it got to by the 5th of May when the retrograde began. And you can see that Pluto is in a fabulous trine with Uranus. Now they're both at this point of the month, as we go into the month, retrograde. But I think what they're saying to you is be very open-minded about the direction your relationships are taking, particularly around friendships. You may find that certain friendships will become a lot more important to you. And one of the things that I think you're going to be drawn towards is the people who are really authentic. Now that may sound like a very obvious thing, but we can all have, perfectly pleasant relationships. But I think you're wanting to connect to someone or a group of people that bring a spark of excitement in terms of what you're collaborating or what you're interested in, and that can draw you closer. But if we look at the position of the Sun and Mercury, they're in that 3rd house in the sign of Libra, which of course is about balance, but the 3rd house is about quick communications. And remember, that is going to be a theme for this month. But if you look at the position of Mercury, it's very Gemini-like in the 3rd house, quick, fast exchanges, but it's in a right angle with Jupiter. And Jupiter then is in an opposition with the Moon, so there is what's known as a T-square back to that position of Mercury. So I feel your communications this month could start off feeling quite optimistic, but something could come up and come out, perhaps from your subconscious, which could surprise you. And maybe it's something that needs to be released. And if you do end up opening up to someone in a way which may feel a bit maybe challenging, in the sense it may make you feel a bit vulnerable, try to go with the process, because the 3rd house is about obviously those interactions, maybe also moving around a bit more physically on short journeys, perhaps exercise and so on. But it can at times be things like social media, and that Moon and Jupiter position suggest, even if a conversation seems, on the face of it, maybe quite matter of fact, it may contain a little nugget of insight which can be very valuable to you. So that's the starting position, but also just sharing with the position of Saturn. So Saturn's in the 8th house. So through to the middle of February next year, if there are financial plans that you need to attend to, what Saturn and then Neptune from the 22nd, when that inverts back into Pisces, are asking you to do is to work very carefully on the detail. So if you're trying to squeeze more from your assets, if you're applying for some borrowings on a mortgage, if you're investing in a pension or equities, I think Saturn's asking you to be very, very diligent on the details. But look at the position of Mars at the start of this month. It's in your 4th house. Now, Mars in the 4th house in the sign of Scorpio, which it traditionally rules, can bring up some powerful emotions. So again, those conversations on the face of it may be quite equitable, Libran, but again, something can get discussed or you learn that can be very revealing. And that becomes more the case when we get to the 6th of the month. Mercury is going to zip through 3 zodiac signs this month, Leo, and on the 6th dives deep into Scorpio, where Mars is. Now they're going to be coming into a much closer relationship as the month goes on. But I mentioned about the full moon of the 7th, and for you it's in the sign of Aries, which shares your fire tropicity, opposing the Sun in house 3. If you are in the mood to be a bit more spontaneous about breaking free and doing something off the cuff, perhaps travelling somewhere, that's actually quite an exciting full moon, I feel. It doesn't have other planetary players feeding in a particularly negative way. But I feel that what the Sun in the 3rd house can do is see us say things easily. The moon in the 9th house asks us to really think about what the meaning is underneath that quick communication. I mentioned about Venus being the star player for you. So on the 13th, she returns to Libra, which she rules. Going to be there through to November the 6th. Don't underestimate the power of your words. Someone could be absolutely captivated by you through to them, but there is that very powerful connection to Uranus and Pluto. So I think, especially if relationship matters have been tense, something can happen right at the core of this month. Could be around a contractual matter, maybe around an agreement with a potential customer, maybe applying for a job, but somehow or another you can convey who you are in a very effective way right at the heart of this month. Now on the 15th through to the 26th, Mercury moving forwards in Scorpio starts to get ever closer to Mars, and they come into an exact conjunction on the 20th. If something isn't working in your home or emotional life, the chances are you're going to surprise people you live with, family members, by being much more direct. You may even find yourself feeling a bit triggered at times, particularly about trivial things that maybe you've mentioned in the past, like, who does what in terms of the domestic chores. And if it's a message that you've diplomatically stated and still it's not being heard, you can be much more forceful about telling people how you feel. I think it's just important to know that with Mercury in the 4th house, it can be a bit subjective. Mercury is about how we think. The 4th house is watery. Mars being in the 4th house can be quite defensive. So you could be a bit prickly at the heart of the month or at the start of the 2nd, 3rd. But then we have a new moon in Libra. Now, new moons in Libra for you usually give you a wonderful opportunity to interact socially, particularly in your locality, whether it's with neighbours, people through any kind of hub, if you've got a shared interest, and it can bring those opportunities for you over the next month. But it's in a complex relationship with both Saturn and Pluto. So I feel this is a new moon that has some gotchas, to be honest. And of course Neptune then on the next day inverts back into that 8th house, which could get you thinking very carefully about where you're most invested, whether it is emotionally, financially, spiritually, or even intimately. But on the 23rd, the Sun moves to join up with Mercury and also Mars in Scorpio. Each year when this occurs, it's your chance to just direct your attentions more to the physical structure of where you live. If you are someone who would like to start a local venture, provide services, take a hobby into something more meaningful, the next month could be promising. But if there has been tensions around relationships, the exact square between the Sun and Pluto, which occurs at that time of the month, may make it very, very difficult to deflect, particularly with that very high octane link between Mercury and Mars. So I think if you don't feel heard or respected around how you feel, you could be feeling quite militant at this part of the month. The 29th, however, sees Mercury enter its third home of the month into your fellow fire sign of Sagittarius. Not its favourite location, but for you, it's bright, it's bubblier. It just brings a different kind of vibe to the end of the month. But I want you to know that Saturn and Jupiter, but also Mars, come into an amazing link as this month comes to a close. If there is something you want to achieve around where you live, or you want to be in touch with a deeper part of your being and you want to convey that to others, you can do so with tremendous conviction. We're talking about three mighty planets. You know, Saturn can be about our evolution in terms of our understanding of who we are. It's not just about hard knocks and making life more limited. And the 8th house can be very, very much to do with understanding the psychological domain. Mars in the 4th house could be about changing something to do with your physical structure. Jupiter in the 12th house is more to do with your spiritual needs. But they're all aligning really well. If you did move at the end of this month, if that's something you're planning, I think your timing is impeccable, and it could be an abode that meets your needs for some time to come. And if you have been feeling that some of your needs or the things you've been expressing earlier in the month have not been heard, I think there's a much greater chance of getting your message through as this month draws to a close. Welcome, Virgo, to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the big themes of this month ahead. Then on screen I'll share the event chart right at the very start of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole of the period. I'll then go through each of the key influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what to look forward to this month. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive by doing so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Your ruler, Virgo, is of course Mercury. Mercury gives you an appreciation of precision. But it's not just noticing the details that's important to you. You want to do something with that information that brings you some kind of tangible return. That's because you're an earth sign. Now, the month starts with Mercury, your ruler, in the part of your situation to do with everyday money. But it can also be to do with our values. The sun's in this location too. And you're going to take this part of the year very seriously around these themes. But right at the heart of this month, there is some fantastic news that I can't wait to share with you, which could see an upturn in your income, which will prove to be very welcome. But also at the very start of this month, Virgo, Venus, the relator, is in your sign, suggesting that as you come into this new month, you could be thinking about your personal appearance, maybe about your look, and you may decide to change it in some kind of way. But don't be surprised if you're single, if more than one person shows an interest in you, particularly from the 15th of the month onwards, when there's going to be a big upturn in the speed of communications between you and others, which can prove to be very exciting. But if you recall, on the 1st of September, Saturn, the planet of structure but also of limitation, did inverse back into your sector of relationships. And through to the middle of February will be in that area. but is joined by the nebulous energies of Neptune on the 22nd, also reversing back into Pisces after its brief visit into Aries. So from now through till the early part of next year is a very important time for relationships. It could be that someone very significant is going to step forwards, but if you're in a tie that's not working so well, I do feel it is going to come under the astral microscope. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person. But understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now is your event chart. Right at the beginning of the month, there's the Sun and also Mercury in House 2. House 2 can be about foundations as well. But look at the position of Jupiter and then across the heavens to the Moon. They're in a very bubbly relationship. The Moon may be a bit more cautious in your sister Earth sign of Capricorn, not its best location, but that is a very positive connection between the two of them. And there is a mutual receptivity because obviously Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, the Moon's the ruler of Cancer, so that Jupiter's drawing in the Moon and perhaps lessening some of that resistance the Moon in Capricorn has. But they're both in a T-square with your ruler Mercury. Now you have a reputation of being someone who's all over, if something needs to be researched in terms of what you want to buy, you can be very savvy. But I think that influence suggests that at points this month, you may find yourself tempted to do something that's a bit more, I don't want to use the word extravagant, but you may want to have a treat. You may want to get together with some jolly friends. You may want to break out a little bit of the discipline that you're being asked to grapple with. And, if you can do that, I actually think that could be very therapeutic. But look at the position of Mars. Mars at the start of this month is in what's known as a semi-sextile with the Sun. So whatever you're thinking about or discussing, Mars in the third house, with great passion, I feel, you are still, despite that potentially fun-loving Jupiter, Moon and Mercury T-square, I still feel that part of you that wants to gain an insight but also gain value is going to be in the mix this month. So that's what we take into the month. I should just say also Pluto, which has now been in Aquarius all this year. If you recall, it re-entered Aquarius on the 19th of November 24. It had been there to the 1st of September that year. But Pluto is going to push you over the years to come to perhaps evolve around your everyday life structures, which is something that you can be quite adhered to. If something's working for you, quite rightly, your mantra would be, why change what's working well? But look at the position of Uranus. That's the most northerly player in this entire solar chart, suggesting there could be, even if it's not something you seek, there could be change around your work, but it may be because of the environment we're all in. But it may turn out to be very liberating for you, and that's part of that wonderful story I'm going to share with you later about the heart of this month. More of that shortly. If you've yet to watch my year 2026 deep dive forecast for Virgo, please click on the link within this video. So on the 6th, your ruler Mercury speeds up, dives deep into Scorpio. Mercury in Scorpio is very canny. That part of you that does like to crunch the numbers is going to be turned up to max. The 7th, however, is a full moon. Full moon in the passionate sign of Aries. It's in an opposition with the Sun in the 2nd house. If something in terms of the ins and outgoings in your situation is a bit out of balance, this is a great opportunity to address that. There could be some unexpected emails or letters around renewals, stuff like software, things like privacy apps, stuff like that, that may have just slipped off your radar. That kind of stuff, insurance policies, just be aware of that. But on the 13th, this is the start point of the month for you personally. Venus moves out of your sign where it's radiating your charm. It's not its best location, Venus in Virgo. You probably know it's in its 4. And if you do have it natally, it can make people maybe a bit cautious about showing affection. But in your own sign in a solar illustration in the 1st house, it's pushing you in a way to have a bit more confidence. But Venus in Virgo is also great for the attention to detail around things like our hair, our nails, our clothes. So if you have given yourself some kind of glam up in the early part of this month, good for you. But Venus moves on the 13th into house 2. And I can almost say with some certainty that through to the 6th of November, you will enjoy the good things in life, where it's good food, meeting up with friends, sensual pleasures, or it may be that you're going to have a stroke of serendipity when it comes to money, because Venus in the 2nd house is very, very reliable in solar astrology for bringing some good news. The trick is not to spend any money that comes in too quickly, and also be aware that if you've been on any kind of diet plan, your resolve could crumble a little bit over the next few weeks. But I mentioned that Venus also interacts with that earlier illustration I showed of Pluto and Uranus. So that's right at the heart of the month. Pluto goes direct. So if you have been over the last 5 months doing a lot of soul searching about what you do for your work, or maybe there have been some issues to do with your energy, your fitness, that you've had to make some changes around, I think Venus moving into your 2nd house, connecting with Uranus and Pluto, could see a job offer come your way, and it could happen very quickly. And especially if you've been proactive in reaching out to people with Mars's help earlier in the month, because Mars, remember, at home in Scorpio, but for you 3, giving you a lot of conviction and thrust around expressing your ideas. But from the 15th through to the 26th, your ruler Mercury starts to cozy up to Mars, and they meet exactly on the 20th. Now, you're going to be a force of nature at that time. I'm not saying you're not normally a force of nature, but if you've got an idea that you feel really inspired about and you want to share it with other people, your determination to showcase it with thrust, authority, conviction and passion is going to be absolutely amazing. If you have fancied a new mode of transport and you have had a bit of fortune financially, I think you could think very seriously through the last third of this month about treating yourself to it. Whether it's a new bike, whether it's an electric scooter, whether it's a board, whether it's a surfboard, whether it is a car, you could find that quite hard to resist if it's something you wanted for some while and the funds are available. And as a counterpoint to that, the new moon of the 21st could give you the opportunity to do even better around finance, but it is in a complex relationship with Pluto and Saturn. So I don't think it's as free-spirited a new moon as usual, to be honest. So I think being balanced about resources, which comes from that full moon of the 7th, is important, even if I think you can enjoy an upturn. The 22nd, however, sees Neptune join up with Saturn back in your 7th house. And as I mentioned before, they're coalescing together and coming back into Aries, in Neptune's case later in January, Saturn mid-February, come together back in your 8th house, and that will be on the 18th of February. But from now until then, important stuff around relationships. And Neptune is wonderful because it gives us so much intuition. Do we always listen to it? Probably no. With Saturn in the mix, there can be a tendency to be very much more cautious, particularly about your boundaries. No bad thing. Boundaries are important, but remember, Saturn rewards hard work, dedication, and application. If you really want to bring a relationship into your world or make one that you're in work better, if you put the effort in, there is a window of opportunity. But equally, Saturn is kind of saying to you, look, if you put everything in and someone is still not really hearing what you're giving to the situation or respecting or appreciating it, then that's something you have to take seriously. And the Sun moves into Scorpio on the 23rd, things speed up, but it clashes brutally with Pluto straight away. There could be a very intense discussion at this point of the month, with Mercury aligning with Mars on the 20th, the Sun squaring off with Pluto, especially if you feel your message isn't being heard, your dedication, application, responsibility, you are someone who takes tasks seriously, and that's one of your great gifts. So I feel through the latter part of this month, a weak relationship could make way. But I want you to know that as Mars moves forwards in Scorpio, it forges a grand water trine with Jupiter and Saturn. And the significance of this is Jupiter and Saturn, when Jupiter first moved into a wonderfully social part of your situation in early June, but came into conflict badly with Saturn on the 15th for the fourth time in a year, but this time in new zodiac signs. And it's possible that you became much more conscious that you were never going to align with one particular person or a group of people. And I feel at the end of this month, if you've reorientated your energy towards people who do appreciate you, do respect you, could be around your social situation, something very, very positive can bring the curtain down on this month. It is true that Mercury, your ruler, makes its third visit of the month on the 29th, moving into your fourth house, and forges a restless opposition with Uranus. You could just want to basically spin out from any kind of responsibilities just as the month draws to a close, which is a bit counter to your usual approach. But there is a big picture here with that wonderful grand water trine, because that's about emotion. But for you, they're in parts of your chart which are about communication. So if your communication is in touch with your feelings, but that's been reciprocated back to you, if you forged an alliance or you clarify a relationship and it is going forwards, it could be a seminal time. And remember, Saturn and Neptune may have their challenges, but they could bring something positive if you put the work in. But equally, the absolute converse can be true. So it's a bit of a polar opposite thing, to be honest, Virgo, depending on your situation. So just to recap, the early parts of this month, very much about resources, using what you've got shrewdly, which I think you have a good track record for, but you could be tempted to splurge a little bit or have some social nights out. Why not? But once Venus moves into your second house, I think that's very positive, and I hope it does bring some good news about a job. Pluto going direct could bring a little bit more clarity and movement in a positive way to some of the virtuous things you've been doing over the last 5 months. So, for example, if you've been watching your diet, you might see the scales start to show that. You may feel your colours better. You may feel that you're a bit more energized. So you can start to get the uplift too. But the month comes to an end with a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, some big discussions, and a spark, and it's very, very exciting for you indeed. Welcome Libra to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some standout details to begin with, then on screen your event chart right at the beginning of the month, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to look forwards to. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now, but please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Your ruler Libra is Venus, and Venus is going to be joining you right at the heart of this month in a very exciting way. So I can't wait to share that with you. But you do start October with the Sun and Mercury in residence, which is very helpful if you want to focus on the things that you're really invested in, you feel passionate about, you want to really prioritize. It's going to give you extra thrust, so that's good. I'm going to share about that with you. But also, as you come into this month, there is an angle between Jupiter, the planet of opportunity and fortune, and Mercury in your sign. And your imagination, but also your enthusiasm, can be infectious this month, and it may be something which can see a breakthrough. Now, there is going to be a full moon opposite your Sun on the 7th, which can hold some challenges, and your annual new moon this year is on the 21st. But it's quite a complex one this time round, but I'll unpack all of that for you. But in the latter part of the month, Libra, whatever you're working on in the earlier parts of October, you get a chance to see how much progress you're making, and there could be a really significant breakthrough around your finances, your professional situation, or your goals and ambitions. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us, it's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm sharing the event chart. So first of all, I think we need to just be mindful of your lovely ruler Venus. So you can see Venus starts this month in the 12th house. Venus is not at her best in Virgo because it's known as being in her fall. So it's a bit more muted, a bit more cautious, finds it more difficult to show the kind of glam that you appreciate, or even at times the confidence to make those moves. But it may see you at the start of this month just really thinking very deeply about your relationships. And even though you're going to be very active in the here and now, the present, about the things that are exciting and sparking you, in the back of your mind, if there is something that's evolving, hasn't been bringing that much satisfaction, or a big relationship has come to a close, you do need to process that. But I just mentioned to you about Mercury and Jupiter. So there's the Sun and Mercury in your sign. And Mercury in the first house is terrific, really, because the sign of Libra is, of course, about balance, but it's also an air sign, so it's about discussion. But the first house is about where we initiate. Now, one of the accusations, which is a bit of a lazy pitch about Libran people, is that you can find it hard to make your mind up. But I feel that that link to Jupiter can give you a real spark of confidence. But I also want to make you aware of the link between the Sun and Mars. It's a semi-sextile, some more subtle influence of 30 degrees, but I feel Mars at home in Scorpio makes you much more aware of not just having ideas, but converting them into something tangible. And Mars is about desire, so I feel you can show desire, you can be decisive. It's just around relationships, there may still be some things that need to be processed. Now, if you look at the position of the moon as the month begins, it is in the 4th house, and that's very much about our immediate emotional environment. It can be about our home. And as September came to a close, the moon did square off to the Sun in your sign. So as we come into October, we're in the midst of a quarter moon. So there may be part of you that does need to toggle a little bit what you want to achieve as an individual with the needs of people around you. So, you know, whether it is other family members, whether it's about the physical place you live, whether it's about your own emotional needs, your determination to focus on the here and now is just given a reminder by the moon that however bubbly that Jupiter and Mercury square is, because the moon is interacting with them in a T-square, just stay a little bit aware of how things feel. Now, at the very start of September, Saturn, the planet of structure but also limitation, reversed back into your sixth house. The sixth house is about those daily routines, can be responsibilities, obligations, can be our work, but it can also be our physical energy. Now Neptune's going to invert back into Pisces to join Saturn on the 22nd. So just sharing with you that Saturn at the very start of this month does suggest you need to measure the output of energy you're putting in, because that tremendous excitement that's been created between the Sun and Mars and Mercury and Jupiter could see you putting all of your effort and time into something that's really sparking and igniting you. But I feel the Moon and Saturn are just saying, stay mindful of getting the sleep you need, the nutrition you need, but also staying just in touch with how you feel. Now on the 6th, we have Mercury move out of your sign, moving into the deep and passionate Scorpio. Now Mercury here is quite a character really, because Mercury can be a bit flippant through its rulership of Gemini, changeable. It's much more to do with precision through its rulership of Virgo, but in the sign of Scorpio it's tremendous for being very penetrative, so getting down into the absolute core of any situation. So if you needed to, research some financial offers, for example, I think you're going to be really crisp and able to crunch the numbers very effectively right through to the 29th when Mercury moves again. So it goes through 3 signs this month. But Mercury is going to move later this month into a conjunction with Mars, but I'll share about that shortly, because on the 7th we have the full moon. The annual Aries full moon is always a bit of a nudge for you, that if you are deeply concentrating on something that's mightily important to you, there could be someone around you that feels your gaze is not on them. Now, maybe the kids, could be your partner, could be your parents, siblings, friends, whatever. And so I feel that sometimes in life it is really important to take a firm grip on our life direction and be very single-minded and not be distracted. You may have that choice to make at this part of the month, because the potential for deflection is there with the moon in your 4th house right at the start of the month. Do you want to be deflected again? That's the question that's going to be asked. On the 13th, however, one of the most magical moments of the whole year for you, Libra, because Venus returns to your sign. Venus in Libra is gorgeous. It gives you enormous charm and charisma, silky way with words. It helps you to connect to people with a good deal of grace. So even if from that full moon there has been a bit of choppiness and you have been feeling sensitive about relationships because of Venus being in your sector of reflection at the start of the month, you're going to move into the moment. And if there has been a breakdown, whether it's an old relationship from many years ago that suddenly you started to need to process again, because that can happen, I feel. The impact, that people can have on us can be so telling, particularly from our childhood, if we're honest. But Venus moving into your own sign is a marvellous prompt to embrace a part of your being which is very, very key to your nature, and that is the way you look. And you can be very stylized, whether you're a dedicated follower of fashion or you've got your own unique way of doing things, there will be an understated classiness about it, and that's going to be amplified right through to November the 6th. But the big issue here is that Venus connects to both Uranus, the planet of unexpected surprises, and Pluto, the planet of transformation. And even if there have been big doubts about relationships or you're not sure, you could meet someone at the heart of this month or through to the 6th of November who could really make your pulse race. It could be very gripping indeed. So that's really exciting. But I think if you have been feeling a bit down in the dumps about a relationship that hasn't been working, this is an opportunity to draw a line in the celestial sand and move forwards. Now, I just should share with you that if you've yet to watch your year 2026 Libra deep dive forecast, you can click on the link within this video and it will take you to it. Now, on the 14th, Pluto goes direct. It's been retracing its steps since the 5th of May. And it's an annual 5-month retrograde. It's been 2.5 degrees, but of course it has been in your sister air sign the whole time. And it has also been forging some very positive links with Uranus, Saturn and Neptune throughout that period. So I don't think it's been all bad, but I think what Pluto in the 5th house is kind of pushing us to do is think about whether we're really expressing joy in life or not. Are we pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone a little bit to connect in all different sorts of ways, whether it's through our creativity, our friendships, our social interaction, or our love life. But because Pluto's involved in that very compelling angle to Uranus and Venus, I think that's very helpful to you that that's gone forwards. But the 15th to the 26th sees Mercury get ever closer and then combine on the 20th with Mars. If there is something around a financial matter that you really feel passionate about, you're going to have a steely side to your nature. There's part of you that can appear to be, very inscrutable, but I feel that as the Sun moves into Scorpio on the 23rd, gives you more innate desire to convert all the hard work you've been putting into fresh ideas earlier in the month into something more tangible. But the Sun squares off to Pluto. If you are in a relationship of any kind at all where you feel that someone's rather controlling or jealous of you or possessive, it could really make your blood boil. You have a reputation of being, someone who likes to maintain that, very even persona. But when aroused, you're a cardinal sign. You're a sign of action and leadership. You can display the energy of your opposite sign of Aries and be much feistier. And that's possible around about the 20th through to the 25th of this month. But only if someone's not really respecting the value you bring to a situation. But the 29th sees Mercury speed through to the sign of Sagittarius. So, and right as this month comes to a close, some kind of electric, quick moving event can occur. It may be a text message, an email, a completely random connection to someone. You could have a conversation that is so inspiring that it really lights you up, but something very dazzling can bring the cosmic curtain down. But I want to just tell you about the angle between Jupiter, Saturn and Mars as this month draws to a close, because they're in a grand water trine. And when Jupiter moved into your sector of success in the early part of June this year, it was challenged on the 15th of June by the limiting energies of Saturn in your sector of relating. And it may have felt that however much you were putting your best foot forwards, somehow or another it was falling on, barren ground. People weren't responsive to what you had to say. But if you've been consistent in what you're trying to achieve, particularly around your professional situation, you could seize a golden prize as this month draws to a close that absolutely fills you with real joy. But it will have come from a lot of application and a lot of dedication and a lot of perspiration. So if you think of where you're applying those kind of characteristics at the moment, that gives you a little bit of a clue of where that can come back to you in a very karmic but positive way as this month comes to a close. Have a great October, Libra. Welcome, Scorpio, to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with. Then on the screen, your event chart right at the start of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole month. I'm then going to go through all the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to look forwards to. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now and help it to continue to thrive. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Your two rulers, Scorpio, traditionally is Mars, which starts this month in your sign, so domicile. That's very helpful indeed. Your other more modern higher octave ruler is Pluto, and that starts this month in the part of your scope, as it has for some time now, that's very much to do with home and emotions. Now, having Mars in your own sign, it's going to give you a determination to go for what works for you, the individual, but they are broadly square as you come into October. And I think that energy between them, which can be to do with power battles, to be honest, but certainly to do with desire, could see you at moments this month, but particularly I feel in the first 2/3 of the month, perhaps attending to some sensitive issues that may have been pushed to one side, or perhaps other people have been reluctant to discuss, but your passion and desire to bring these into the open is going to grow with conviction as the month unfolds, because Mercury, the planet of communication, joins you on the 6th, and the Sun joins you on the 23rd. So the last third of this month is going to see you very assertive, but the first part of this month perhaps in a much more tender space. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart right at the beginning of the month. There's Mars in your sign, 5 degrees 50. Mars loves being in your sign. It's very much to do with desire. There's something about Mars in Scorpio that's different to Mars in Aries, which obviously it also rules. I feel, in a way, it primes you to want to take on challenges, to not duck out of complex or sensitive matters. But you can see Pluto is on that 4th house cusp. It's going to be there for a long while, as you know, probably through to 2043 initially, and then again to 244. So where you live, how you live there, who with, your own inner emotions are going to go through quite a revolution over those years ahead. So Mars being in your own sign can make you very direct at the start of this month, but look at the position of the Sun and also Mercury. They're in house 12. The 12th house can be very much more psychological. It can be issues that we're a bit reluctant to look at, our shadow side. It may be some details with Mercury in the 12th house that you need to be very attentive to, because Mercury is actually in a very buoyant right angle with Jupiter at the start of this month. Now Jupiter moved into your sister water sign at the start of June, Cancer, where it loves to be, and that's very much about expansion and travel. But that runs counter to that Pluto energy, which is asking you to concentrate more on your inner world or where you live. But when Jupiter moved, it came into a conflict with Saturn at that time in Aries. And perhaps you haven't really felt that your life was opening up in quite the way you've wanted it, because that initial chart as Jupiter arrived wasn't blessed with as much benefits as it normally would do. Now early next year Jupiter's going to come back to you in a very much more positive way, and it can do later this month too. But as you go into this month, it's important to understand that if something or someone says something that seems insensitive or is a little bit triggering, that angle between Jupiter and Mercury could see you express how you feel in a very reactive way. Also be aware the moon is in Capricorn at the start of this month, but in an opposition with Jupiter. So on the face of it, that's quite a bubbly opposition, especially about communication, but it's just because of Mercury being in the 12th house. So I think, particularly through to the 6th, but possibly throughout the month, something could come into the open. There could be a revelation, but it may be you driving that, pushing to get someone to discuss something that they're reluctant to look at, or conversely, someone could be pushing you to look at something that you feel a little tender about. But the more beneficial side of the Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, it's brilliant for taking soundings behind the scenes, doing research, checking out how people might feel quietly, confidentially. And the Sun is actually in a fine link with Mars as we come into October, what's known as a semi-sextile, 30 degrees. So don't underestimate, even if things don't seem to be rattling along at the pace you would like early in the month, don't underestimate that whatever you're doing in preparation can come out later on in a constructive way. Now, if we go back to the 1st of September, Saturn, which obviously can be challenging. Saturn reminds us of our responsibilities, our limitations, and it's in your 5th house, and it's going to be joined again this month by Neptune, which inverts back into Pisces for one final time in this entire cycle of 165 years through to the end of January on the 22nd of this month. But Saturn begins this month just asking you to work very hard at your talents, because if you do, later this month, as I will share shortly, there is a massive window of opportunity. But if you're feeling, because of the Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, that you're not really getting the recognition that you deserve, or people are sidelining you, or you're encountering some gossip, just keep the faith. This month is going to develop favourably for you. Venus also starts this month in your 11th house. The friends that are really worthy of you can be very important this month, but I do feel by the middle of the month you could be reviewing some involvements, perhaps even a romantic one. So that's what we come into the month with. But on the 6th, Mercury arrives in your sign. Mercury here is the ultimate researcher. This would be brilliant if you wanted to work in forensics, if you wanted to work in medicine, perhaps in a lab, if you wanted to work in banking or finance, someone who really was able to penetrate right down into the numbers in a brilliant way. So Mercury moving into your sign shifts you from reflection to being in the present. And of course you have Mars itching to make an impact in your sign, perhaps a little impatiently at times. And as this month goes on, the two are going to get closer and meet on the 20th. But I'll share more about that shortly, because on the 7th we have the first lunation. It's a full moon. It's in the other sign that's ruled by Mars, which is Aries. But for you, this particular full moon, the 6th, 12th axis, could tease into the open any intrigues, possibly politics at work. If you're not really enjoying where you're working, you can't really feel you can trust certain individuals, that could be a theme for a couple of weeks. Then on the 13th, Venus moves into your 12th house, and that can heighten a part of you that wants to really understand the sincerity of all sorts of connections, but it could make you much more thoughtful through to the 6th of November. But if a relationship has been stumbling I think this can see you really thinking very carefully about whether to continue. It does forge an immediately positive link to Uranus and also Pluto, but it's very, very psychological. So what you're wanting in any relationship, even a financial relationship, is an understanding of what people's true motivations are. But this is where your talent for understanding what's not necessarily spoken can really glow up right at the heart of this month, because also Pluto on the 14th ends a 5-month retrograde. So if you have been feeling uncertain about where you live, or there's been some politics with family members, or your own inner journey has felt very deep and tender at times, it wouldn't be a surprise. So even though Venus does dive deep into the 12th house, which can make us think very carefully about people from our past, whether ties are viable in the present, whether people are as honourable and trustworthy as we would like, because of the connection to Uranus, which is exalted in your sign, but also to Pluto, your modern ruler, I feel your talent for divining what people really think or mean is going to be astonishing. So if you wanted to make some informed decisions around investments or a relationship at this time, I don't think anyone is going to pull the proverbial wool over your eyes, but it could be a point in the month where you do feel a bit tender, if I'm honest. But then the 15th through to the 26th, peaking on the 20th, Mercury's moving forwards and forges a very confident conjunction. That's where two planets are side by side with Mars, your traditional ruler. That's magnificent. If ever there was an energy that can put you on the front foot, up for challenges, you know, you're a very formidable person when you're fired up, very determined and willful in a positive way, and something that's important to you that you want to drive forwards with can start to shape up over the next few days. It's just the new moon, ordinarily a positive event, is actually in your 12th house on the 21st. So if you are coming to terms with someone who hasn't met your expectation, it could show up on that. But then the 22nd sees Neptune join Saturn back in your 5th house. The 23rd, the Sun storms into your sign. One of the most exciting moments of the whole year, but this year, like last, squares with Pluto, your modern ruler. Now, of course, that's part of the story of this month from the beginning of the month with Mars and Pluto in a square. So I think if something you want to achieve for you as the individual goes counter to what you need emotionally or what people close to you want emotionally, that's where there could be tensions, politics, or even arguments. But one of the things you will find with Mars being joined by the Sun in Scorpio is your physical vitality will skyrocket. You're going to really feel much more strident in the last 10 days of this month. Up for any kind of challenge. If you feel people are being unfair, you're up for all comers. You know, you're really going to be combative. And I think that's when Scorpios can be at their best. You know, you don't like it when people have double standards, or people perhaps you yourself can be at times very shrewd, all the way to maybe even cunning, but you do have a particular set of standards that you expect from other people towards you. And I think you're going to roar into action in the last third of this month in a very exciting way. But there may be some skittles that are knocked out of the way as you thrust forward. So one of the tricks I think is going to be important not to run counter to your own needs by being too impatient, too impulsive, particularly with Mars and Pluto in a square from the start of the month and the Sun's square with Pluto, and also the conjunction with Mars and Mercury. So that can bring out a much more strident, direct, perhaps even argumentative part of your nature. But what I want to tell you is, if we go back to Jupiter moving into Cancer, because it's exalted there, there would have been videos out there sharing about how amazing this is going to be, particularly for water signs. Because Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces, a lot of people relate to Jupiter as the ruler of Sagittarius. That's its happy-go-lucky, very confident, optimistic, expansive energy. It still has that in Cancer, but it's really more about the emotional domain. And as this month comes to a close, Mars in your sign moves forwards, aligns with Jupiter, but also Saturn. So we have a grand water trine. It's brilliant, because I don't think when Jupiter moved into Cancer it got off to the best start. As I mentioned before, you will receive its blessings next year in the first 6 months of 26 in a much more fulsome way. So because Jupiter's in the 9th house of travel and expansion, because Saturn's in the 5th house of fun, joyfulness and expression, I know Saturn's not really associated with those things, but Saturn is associated with industry. Put industry into those things, but having Mars in your sign, which is about initiative, brings out its more Aries echo. It's about you taking on challenges in a very direct and instinctive way. And if you push forwards towards the end of this month confidently around something that you're really proud and sure of, but something that helps you to express your unique brilliance and charisma, you can really achieve a major breakthrough as this month draws to a close. Also, Mercury moves out of your sign on the 29th, and there could be some good but unexpected financial news, just absolutely from nowhere. Ping, an email, text message, and it could really, really please you because of the opposition to Uranus. So the first half of this month, Scorpio, very much a balance between what you want to achieve in the here and now with Mars in your sign. Jupiter and Mercury. Jupiter is buoyant, but it's saying stay in touch with your feelings, your sensitivities. There is that sensitive stuff to work through. Venus is going to be moving into a deep part of your chart at the heart of the month. It does link very well to two planets that are important to you, Pluto and Uranus. There could be a major revelation, but the last third of this month is your turn to turn up the celestial afterburners. Really feel that heavenly energy is right behind you, and if you're focused, clear on what your plan and strategy and desires are, nothing is going to stand in the way of a very committed and motivated Scorpio like you. If you've yet to watch my year 2026 deep dive forecast for Scorpio, please click on the link within this video, which will take you there. Have a great October, all the best, and goodbye. Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with, then on screen share your event chart. Right at the beginning of October, that always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what to look forward to. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. Please click or tap the bell notification symbol. The first 2/3 of this month, Sagittarius, put a lot of emphasis on your social interaction, your friendships, your network, but also your long-term future plans. So that's really exciting. But as the month goes on, there is going to be a shift. Mars starts this month, the planet of desire, in a hidden part of your scope, which can stir up the sediment from old issues that perhaps we think we've worked through, and sometimes our responses can be a little bit surprising. But Mercury and the Sun are going to join up with Mars as this month goes on. So there is going to be a much more psychological phase which really kicks in and becomes much more intense as the month goes on, but particularly from the 20th. So I will unpack all of that for you. But your ruler is the glorious Jupiter. And if you remember, Jupiter moved for you into your 8th house of long-term finance at the beginning of June last year. The problem was it was checked by the planet of restriction, Saturn. And it may be that if you wanted to speculate to accumulate, particularly if you're a more entrepreneurial person or just trying to squeeze more from your long-term assets, that may have not been so easy since then. Just to reassure you, I think in the early part of next year, there's a really great prospect for you to do that. But later this month, Jupiter and Saturn, which clashed in June, are actually going to forge a very positive alliance. And Mars, the planet of action, is going to be in the mix too. So I can't wait to share that with you. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart. As ever, we need to be mindful of the two luminaries, the Sun and also Mercury in the sign of Libra, which of course is about balance. But it's also a communicational sign, it's an air sign. And for you, what you're looking for is balance and positive interactions in your friendships. Any alliances, collaborations that you're developing, they need to work well. But the moon, very much about how we feel, is in the rather more cautious sign of Capricorn. And that suggests your life foundations are going to be part of this month's story. So we can be idealistic, we can have a big plan, but I feel because the moon is opposite your ruler Jupiter and they both pin back in a T-square to Mercury, like the Sun in your 11th house, it's probably best not to be over optimistic as you come into this month, and make sure that if you are wanting to carefully use your resources, that you don't get too swept away with things initially. However, Jupiter, as I mentioned, is going to be developing later this month a very exciting potential for you. But I just want to remind you about the role of Mars. Mars is in your 12th house. 12th house can be very psychological. Mars rules the sign of Scorpio traditionally. There may be something that you have worked through in the past that could still be a little bit tender, but you might not be completely conscious of this because Mars in the 12th house can trigger our sensitivities. And of course, Mars can be about anger, and the 12th house can be about sadness. It can also be, sadly, about betrayal. So if you did go through something in your past which was quite challenging, I think as this month goes on, there is going to be a series of energies which could bring up some old sediment that you may need to look at. But one of the great things about this month is that Mars starts it in a very good semi-sextile with the Sun. If there are particular connections you have to people or someone close who really has your back and understands some of your history, they can be very supportive through this month. The other thing to point out is that Venus, the planet of relating but also of money, is in a very prominent part of your chart. If you want to make progress in terms of your career, the contacts you have will be influential with Mercury and the Sun, but the way you communicate to those contacts will be part of the process. So Venus can give you an added level of discretion and a degree of diplomacy and charm, so that's very positive. And just to go back to the 1st of September, you may recall that Saturn, which has quite the reputation, inverted back into your 4th house of emotion, will be joined on the 22nd of this month by Neptune, which rules the sign of Pisces, the modern ruler. And so it does suggest this month that at times, just staying in touch with how you feel is really important, but particularly from the 3rd through to the 6th, because as Mercury moves forwards, it does forge an inconjunction, what's known as a quincunx, with Saturn. So as much as there may be someone who's great fun to be with, may want to work with you closely, always let Saturn and then Neptune guide you by, does it feel right? And I think it's something that Sagittarius people can be slightly dismissive of because of your innate boldness, innate positivity. You want to be on the front foot. You can think that by just remaining very dynamic, that there's no obstacle you can't overcome, which is a fantastic quality. But I think that Saturn and Neptune right through to the middle of February next year, when Saturn emerges back into Aries, following on for Neptune at the end of January, they are saying this is going to be a key time for your emotional world, the foundations of your world. So as you go into this month, it looks sociable, it looks bubbly, it looks buzzy, but just being aware of those more psychological influences with Mars, Saturn and Jupiter is important too. So on the 6th of this month, Mercury joins up with Mars in that 12th house. Mercury in the 12th house is not so happy, but you can turn this to your advantage, because Mercury actually in Scorpio is fantastic for any kind of research. If there is something you want to check out deeply, you can do it with Mercury's help through to the 29th, when Mercury will be arriving in your zodiac sign. However, on the 7th of this month, we have a full moon. Full moons, moon opposite sun, can tease into the open something that may be a little out of kilter. One of the things that I think maybe that you're going to think about over the following 2 weeks is your time management. You know, and that's where Mars and then Mercury being in your 12th house are just saying it's great to be in connection to people, but those and Saturn in the 4th just are encouraging you to always orientate towards people you feel very comfortable with, all the way to feeling emotionally safe. But the 13th is one of the most stunning moments of the whole year, to be honest, and it can be fantastic for you. Because Venus moves into Libra, which she rules, but this is very social, so she's replacing Mercury. But Venus here, she's been using her charm to help you in the first 2 weeks of the month professionally. Now it's going to help you around those social interactions. But the connection between Venus, Uranus and Pluto suggests a very important conversation can happen at the heart of this month. It may be social, it could even be romantic, but some kind of electric connection can prove to be extremely exciting. The 14th sees Pluto end a long retrograde, which began in early May. It's an annual 5-month event. Pluto's about transformation. It's in your 3rd house. It's been there since, first of all, for 10 weeks in 23 from March. We had about 35 weeks in 24, and now it's in the sign of Aquarius full time. And for you, that could have a transforming impact on your ideas, your connection to your community, how you use technology can all be very, very important for you. So Pluto going direct and Venus connecting to it, along with Uranus, can be very positive at that point of the month. But the 15th to the 26th sees Mercury and Mars in a conjunction, which peaks exactly on the 20th. And that's in a very tender part of your scope. When Mars and Mercury are together, it can make us a bit impatient about expressing our ideas. But the 12th house is so tender and sensitive, you may find yourself suddenly wanting to say something if you feel someone's being unfair in quite a triggering way, to be honest. The 21st, the new moon in Libra, would ordinarily be your annual event to revive and refresh your social interaction. That's a complex new moon, particularly with Neptune going back into your 4th house of emotion on the 22nd and the Sun moving into your 12th house of deep reflection on the 23rd. So we have that conjunction between Mercury and Mars, followed by the Sun arriving in your 12th house, but then clashing very painfully, I feel, with Pluto. There may be some very powerful conversations at this point in the month. Someone may say something to you that you're not expecting. They may have an observation on the way you approach things that you're not conscious of. But equally, you could reveal something that you've been harbouring deeply. You could bring something up to do with an old grievance or event. It may be linked to a sibling. It could be linked to a neighbour. And when you do share this, you're going to share it with a lot of conviction. So this can be quite a powerful part of the whole year for you, because as I said at the outset, your default is to be resolutely positive and on the front foot, which is a fantastic quality. But you really are being pushed to be quite picky about your social circle, quite choosy about your friendships, selective about your long-term plans, to make sure that always the emotional dimension is something you're considering, or where you're living and who you're living with. So in this last third of the month, stuff that may have lain dormant right deep within you. Because I really believe in something called Gestalt, which is essentially that we store emotions within our body, because whenever a big shock happens, our way of dealing with it, or the body or the mind's way of dealing with it, is not necessarily to process it at that moment. We could go very tense, we may get angry, we may get tearful. We don't necessarily move the emotion through us. And it's possible that you can use these energies in the last third of this month to unlock and free and release stuff that's been really perhaps inhibiting for a long time. So don't judge yourself if you feel vulnerable, or if you feel that some of your frailties are showing, or if you feel anxious. Embrace that, because it's all part of the human state. We all have those emotions, and it's very, very important. And that's really the lesson of Saturn over the last couple of years, to accept that just like everyone else, you're not a machine, because there is that part of you that has that innate self-belief and desire to bounce back, be very redoubtable, resilient. They're all incredible qualities. You've not lost them. You're just being asked by Saturn to become more aware of growing another part of your consciousness, which is the emotion. So at the end of this month, as Saturn, Jupiter and Mars all align in a grand water trine, you could make sense of something that's proved quite elusive for you for quite a long time. Secrets can be revealed. You know, if you're someone who's very much into personal development, you're reading books on, self-help books, you're having some counselling, all of these things, if you're trying to release yourself from some kind of addictive behaviour, all of that can come into focus in a very constructive and positive way if you embrace the opportunity as this month draws to a close. And then with Mercury moving into your Sun on the 29th, give yourself permission to do something a bit more Sagittarius, a bit more off the cuff, a bit more that just gives you a switch of gear, which brings a spark of excitement and passion, which is obviously very much what you're about. So the story of this month is quite complex for you, Sagittarius, but if you can go with it, there's so much growth and so much to gain. Because if you try to avoid some of this tender stuff, you could find that your emotions are really up and down in quite a changeable way. Whereas if you stay in touch with how you feel, it could be a really life-changing month in an extremely constructive manner. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 Sagittarius deep dive video, please click on the link within this video and you can view it now. Have a great October, all the best and goodbye. Welcome Capricorn to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the big themes of the month ahead. Then on screen I'll share your event chart. Right at the beginning of October, that always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences frame by frame to give you a really clear picture of what to look forward to. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. But please also click or tap on the bell notification symbol. As you come into this month, Capricorn, the Sun is in the most elevated position of its entire journey through the sky in your personal year. And that's really an echo of what your sign is about, which is a contact to the world at large in a very realistic, physical way. The Sun is at the heart of our existence, so you get a chance to really be very dynamic when it comes to your goals and ambitions. And if those targets are really clear, because the sun's in a terrific angle to Mars, in a very collaborative part of your chart, there's a great chance to take a giant step towards something you've been reaching towards for some while. But also later in this month, on the 21st, we have a new moon in your sector of success too. But it's quite complex this year. It's not quite as helpful as it might have been in past years because of the angle it forges to your ruler, ironically Saturn, but also Pluto. But I also want to take you back to the early part of June 2025. Jupiter, the planet of growth and optimism, moved into your sector of relationships. Now, ordinarily, once every 12 or 13 years, as Pluto comes to the end of its cycle and revisits that sector of relationships for you, that's a great chance for you to revitalise this key part of your life. But the second irony is that it's squared off with your ruler Saturn, which was exact on the 15th. So I don't feel that necessarily some of your relationship hopes have been met since then in the way you may have expected or the way you may have been told. But what I can tell you is later this month, Jupiter does forge an incredibly exciting angle to the triple irony, Saturn. So I can't wait to share that with you. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far, all of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen now is your event chart. You can see that your ruler Saturn is right at the root of the chart. It's pretty close to the 4th house cusp. So communications with people like siblings, neighbours, people in your community that has an impact on your emotions is going to be a big part of the story for you right through to the middle of February next year, when Saturn makes its way back into the sign of Aries. Those strands can still be important, but that really primes up a 2.25 year period when anything to do with where you live, perhaps changing your home in some kind of way, adding to your family, those are going to be important strands. But as you come into this month, your everyday communications are really very much to the fore. But if you look at the position of Jupiter, like I just mentioned, it is in your sector of relationships, which, you know, on the face of it is very hopeful. But if we look at Mercury, like the Sun, it's in a very elevated position. If you are applying for a job, or you're having an interview, or doing a presentation, just be aware with the moon in your sign, 19 degrees, in an opposition with Jupiter, and in a T-square back to Mercury, just don't go beyond your normal way of approaching things, which is to be very thorough, very diligent, but you don't usually overgild the lily. And if you are tempted to do so this month, particularly if you are trying to, you know, gain some traction in the situation, I don't think it's the best for you. So what I would say with that aspect, particularly between Jupiter and Mercury, it's a square, but it's one of those squares that can give us a bit of swagger, a bit of extra self-confidence. The moon in your sign is going to make you much more conscious of what you want as an individual. But essentially, because the moon's coming out of a square to the sun, which brought the cosmic curtain down on September, your need to be an individual might not quite chime with the expectations of someone that you need to support your hopes and goals. So that maybe that if you're wanting to make progress around those professional hopes, you might have to compromise somewhat from everything you want. So having realistic expectations and also not offering to do too much for what the value of your services are is going to be a big thing, even if your goals and ambitions can really take a big step forwards this month. Now, I mentioned in my introduction that the Sun and Mars were in a great relationship. It's semi-sextile, 30 degrees. It's not quite there. You can see Mars is just under 6, so it's about 2 degrees apart, so it's not bad. And that's very positive. If you can combine ambition with collaboration, that's something that can work well for you. So those are the starting positions for you. And on the 6th of this month, Mercury moves from that very dominant 10th house. For some Capricorns, you may even be thinking about retraining, changing your role. Maybe you've gained a lot of life experience, but maybe the sector you've worked in has changed because of technology, or different demands have dropped off, and you may find yourself thinking again and using lots of different experiences you've got, but in a fresh way, and that's a very positive thing. But then Mercury moves to join up with Mars, not exactly initially, by moving into Scorpio, and scrutinizing your friendships, your connections, and forging shrewd ones will be a big part of the developing story of this month. But on the 7th, we have a full moon, and it's a full moon in the 4th house for you, but in the fiery Aries. Essentially, it's a full moon that's saying, however much you're going full bore for some kind of big goal, you need to stay in touch with your emotions, but you also need to make sure that your support structure can support whatever it is you're aiming to achieve. On the 13th, however, Venus provides a tremendous fillip for you. It moves to replace Mercury at the very top of your chart. Your ability to get on with people in a personable, reliable way is really going to come back to you. You know, you may feel at times that you don't necessarily get quite the recognition that your talents deserve, but I think what people do see with you is how hardworking and diligent you are, and the way you connect with people, because you know Venus gives you some extra diplomacy there. That can be very, very helpful in terms of boosting your goals right through to November the 6th. So take that. But it also, Venus forges an immediately positive link to Pluto in your sector of everyday money, but also to Uranus, which is pushing you to revolutionize your approach to your everyday life structures. So some very good news can come in for you at the heart of this month. Also, Pluto goes direct on the 14th. If you have been treading water a little bit about your income since early May, not a complete surprise, things can thrust forwards. 15th to the 26th sees Mercury moving ever closer and then going beyond the position of Mars. They meet on the 20th exactly. That's going to be a key day in this month. Mercury and Mars, when they're together, can make us a bit impatient about expressing our ideas, but we can certainly express them with conviction, authority, enthusiasm and thrust. And if there's something that really is burning in you, a passion, you can articulate it very, very potently at that time. The new moon on the 21st is a chance to continue to raise your profile, but it's a complex new moon and it does clash with Saturn and Pluto. What I'd say with that new moon is that if you're keeping things steady, you're keeping your expectations real, it can be an asset. Neptune returns to Pisces on the 22nd. It left on the 30th of March. It's connecting again with your ruler Saturn, which came back into Pisces on the 1st of September. Neptune can be very much about subtlety, really. It can be very expressive, it can be very mystical, it can be about spirituality. It's moving back into your sector of words. Saturn can make us a bit inhibited in the 3rd house, but it also makes us real. I feel what Neptune does, in a way, it softens Saturn's coolness and brings a little bit more simpatico, so don't see that as a bad thing. On the 20th, however, we do have that burnishing Mercury-Mars conjunction, followed soon after by the 23rd, the Sun making its way into Scorpio. The great thing about the Sun making its way into a water sign is if you think about the bottom of a river, the basin of a river, it's earth and you're an earth sign. But water flows through it, so you conduct water well. They go well together. So for you, the Sun moving here is about your friendships. It's about your long-term plans. It's also about your idealism to a degree. It's coming on the back of that Mercury-Mars conjunction, but what it does do is come into a crunching right angle with Pluto. If there are people around you, perhaps friends, perhaps business associates, who don't share your vision, it could really show up at this time. There could be quite a powerful clash of wills. Just know that it is important to have that idealism, but your great gift is keeping it real. A balance between the two is going to be the secret to success. And in the latter part of this month, whereas Jupiter and Saturn, Jupiter is about hope, but it's the greater benefit. Saturn is about restriction and it's the greater malefic. Remember, they clashed on the 15th of June. In the last week of this month, they aligned beautifully, but along with Mars in that sector of collaboration. So though there may be some people who make way, there can be other people you become aligned to in a much more committed manner. And the thrust that goes with that towards the end of this month can be amazing. But I do think Saturn being in your third house does require you to choose your language with care. It's not to say that you're going to be deliberately unkind or unpleasant, but Saturn here over the last couple of years has been asking you to work at understanding the emotional vibe of the host of Pisces. So if you can get a mix between conveying a message but staying in touch with the feeling side of it, that's a winning formula. So something that just seemed very inhibited and out of reach in the middle of the year, in June, could come to pass in the latter part of this month, and it may be to do with a big goal, ambition or hope you've got, but I think collaboration is going to be important. But the key is that you need to be collaborating with exactly the right people, otherwise some tensions may be manifest. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive forecast, Capricorn, please click on the link within this video. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great October. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Aquarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the big themes of the month ahead. Then on screen I'll share your event chart right at the beginning of October, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to expect in the month ahead. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. Please click or tap also on the bell notification symbol. As you come into this new month, Aquarius, Mars, the planet of desire, is right at the top of your chart. That suggests that you're going to be quite bold when it comes to ambitions. But it's going to be joined, Mars in Scorpio, by first Mercury and then the Sun. So as the month goes on, initially I think there's part of you that's wanting to bring a spark of variety into your situation, be a bit more free-spirited and independent. But if change is something you're hankering for around your work, the chances are things can really start to fall into place as the month draws to a close. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart. Now we need to be mindful of what's in your zodiac sign, which is Pluto, but also your two rulers, Saturn traditional and Uranus modern. So Pluto's parked up just on that first house cusp because on the 5th of May, Pluto went into a retrograde. It's going to go direct in the middle of this month. It's inverted back 2.5 degrees. But look at the position of your modern ruler, Uranus, also in retrograde. They're in a trine still, as they have been pretty well since Uranus moved into the sign of Gemini. And that's an electric energy, which can be very constructive. And they're going to be visited in a stimulating way by Venus, the planet of relating, but also of money, also at the heart of the month. So that's really exciting. But we always need to be mindful of the two luminaries. The moon is parked up in the 12th house. Suggestion, you could feel a bit sensitive at times this month. If you look at the position of Jupiter, the planet of fortune, it's in your 6th house, very much to do with work, fitness, can be to do with where we want to be a bit more virtuous. But they're actually in an opposition, but in a T-square with Mercury, which, like the Sun, is in the free-spirited 9th house. Now, we know the sign is very much about balance, equilibrium, exchanges of communication, and can be about relating. The 9th house can be about contracts. With Mercury there, which can be very much a business planet, Jupiter can be very much a deal maker, they're in a square. I would say that's a square that can be a good thing for you. It can give you a positive attitude as you come into this month, but just be aware the moon is in the mix too. So the moon's emerging from a quarter moon, which came to pass at the end of September. And that quarter moon, a 9th, 12th house energy, what that can do is things that you may ordinarily shrug off can have a tendency to be amplified, but particularly things that, you know, maybe are a little bit more to do with the emotional domain. So just be aware that 9th house energy is very, very positive, very expansive, but it can be very enlarging, and the 12th house energy is very tender, psychological, and to do sometimes with secrets or even people that we can't necessarily completely trust. You can see right at the top of the chart there is that position of Mars. So that's going to give you a lot of strident energy. But look at Pluto and Mars. They're actually in a square by about 4 degrees. These are the two rulers of Scorpio. If you're wanting to go for something this month in a very direct way, your ambition can definitely be emboldened. But just remember the moon is quite tender as you come into the month. The other influence we need to be mindful of is your traditional ruler Saturn, which over the last couple of years, apart from the 25th of May to the 1st of September, has been in your sector of everyday money. But also the second house can be about our foundations and can be about our self-worth. If you really worked on those areas, become very disciplined about your expenditure, teased out some costs that weren't really necessary, but also been working inside yourself in terms of really strengthening your resilience and appreciating the qualities you have. Saturn has been an asset, but it may be that an income source that you used to have has contracted over these last couple of years. But I've got some very exciting news to share with you towards the end of this month, which could see you gain a reward for a lot of hard work you've been putting in. So Aquarius, as we make our way into the month on the 3rd to the 6th, Mercury in that 9th house energy can give us a real appreciation of personal independence, space, travel, but it's in a quincunx with Saturn. Not a good time to be too free and easy with resources, to be honest. But on the 6th, Mercury joins up with Mars in your 10th house. If you have been thinking about changing your job, Mercury there's great because it can give you the impulse to update your online presence, you know, CVs, resumes, have different resumes or CVs for different opportunities. Really sharpen up how you might be perceived by people who are in a position of influence. Also, Mercury moving to the top of your chart could see you think about self-employment. If that's something you've always aspired to, entrepreneurship, the desire for that could become red hot as this month goes on. The 7th sees a full moon. Full moons are when the sun and the moon are basically competing. The sun's urging you to open things up, but also get in touch with your more philosophical side. The moon in the 3rd house can be about quick thinking, but not necessarily be so in touch with our emotions. So, but your ideas and what they mean to you can come to the fore over the next 2 weeks. If you do work in media, technology, any kind of interactive sector, that's going to be a key period of the month and the year for you. On the 13th, however, Venus the Relator, which starts this month in the passionate 8th house and potentially could bring some rewards in the first 2 weeks to do with a contract, or maybe a partner could have some good news, then moves into your sister air sign of Libra, replacing Mercury, but forges a dazzling link to your modern ruler Uranus, but also to Pluto in your sign. A conversation you have, and it might be around a contract, could prove to be very, very positive right at the heart of this month. Also, Pluto, which has been inverting in your sign since the 5th of May, goes direct on the 14th. So that's great as well. If you have been feeling that you've been treading water about something you're very invested in, it can now start to gain traction. But the electric energy of Uranus in the 5th house is really pushing you to showcase your unique abilities. Aquarius people have a duality. You know, some Aquarius people perhaps are more noticeably different, novel, like to be a little bit fresh in their approach, but other Aquarius people can actually be really quite adhered to more traditional approaches. And a blend of those two energies, Saturn and Uranus, is essentially what the duality is about. But I think what Uranus is going to do, it's obviously inverting back into Taurus at the end of the first week of November. But when it returns back into Uranus next year on the 26th of April, what it will do is give you a 7-year window of opportunity to really turn up and absolutely dazzle people with your unique ideas, forward thinking and innovation. And you can become very much the flavour where in the past perhaps some of your foresighted ideas weren't really receiving as much recognition as they could. And there could be an example of that at the heart of this month. So it can be very heartening to get some great feedback, but you could also have a connection with someone romantically who's different to you, comes from a different cultural background, but there's something fated about that connection right at the heart of this month. Or it could be about business, because Venus can be about money. Now, the 15th to the 26th sees Mercury and Mars broadly aligned. They're exact on the 20th. And that's a combination which I think is great if you are wanting to reach for the stars professionally. Because Mars all this month is going to give you extra authority. What Mercury does in a conjunction with Mars is give us the brain power and the communicational sharpness, but together they're quite a punchy combination, particularly with Mars in Scorpio, which is it traditionally rules. So it can give you much more self-confidence to raise your profile, seek out the golden prize. But there is on the 21st a new moon in your sister air sign of Libra, the 9th house. So that desire for change or refreshing parts of your existence is going to be strong. It is quite a complex new moon. It's not without its challenges, but it's followed immediately by Neptune inverting back into Pisces, joining up with Saturn. Neptune will be there through to the end of the 26th of January. Saturn, of course, through to the middle of February. So this next period, these next 3 or 4 months, is going to be a lot about the foundational parts of your situation. But if you've really beavered away and really made some significant changes, become much more disciplined about expenditure, become much more conscious of the worth and value of things. It's not just down to the price, it's down to the intrinsic benefits that we gain from whatever we purchase. So if some more frivolous spending has made way in your situation, it's because you've been working on what's really essential. And if you've worked hard on it, you're going to get your reward in the last phase of this month. Because on the 23rd, Aquarius, the sun reaches right to the top of your chart. And that, if you recall, is the start of the journey of this month, with Mars right at the top of your chart. It's just that the sun clashes with Pluto, just like Mars did at the start of October. What's the significance? Well, that unique part of your nature may in some ways need to conform with the expectation of whoever you're negotiating with. So if it is for a new job, you might not get absolutely everything you want, to be honest. You could have a battle of wills in a current situation. You could even have a battle of wills in a current romantic relationship. If one partner, even if subtle ways, tries to dominate the tie, that could be an issue at this part of the month. But also I think there's part of you that wants to be much more direct. You know, you perhaps have been a tad idealistic in your past. I think you're being much more realistic as this month goes on. You're seeing the world as it is, and that could surprise certain people that you're interacting with, that you just punch through and seize opportunities for what they are. As the month comes to a close, Mercury moves into the friendliest part of your scope. There's a lot of drama this month. You know, obviously you could find yourself traveling early in October, exploring new options, learning new information, perhaps changing things up, seeking more variety. But as the month goes on, it is very much to do with the physical world, whether it is to do with your work, whether it's to do with other ambitions, to do with property. You're determined to push forwards and not be defeated. And Mercury at the end of the month, moving into the friendless part of your chart, going opposite your modern ruler, just says, give yourself permission to have some fun. But I've kept the best till last, because when Jupiter moved into your sector of work at the end of week 1 in June, it was conflicted by your modern ruler. They're going to be forging a wonderful trine as this month comes to a close, but Mars is in the mix as well. So a grand water trine. Water is about emotion, but for you, the houses they're in is very earthy. Saturn 2, Jupiter 6, so Saturn 2 is very Tauran, 6 is very Virgoan, and 10 of Scorpio Mars, very much to do with Capricorn. That earthy energy, if you're in tune with your emotions, but also your ambitions, I feel all the dedication you've been investing over the last 2.25 years, with Saturn making its way through Pisces, which is not its favourite sign, will and can be rewarded. But it is down to how much you've rolled up your sleeves and really put maximum effort in and really used every ounce of your dedication, and then you could see something really transform, because Saturn can have a spiritual dimension to it. The second house, as I mentioned before, can be about our sense of self-worth. If you really worked on that, that energy is going outwards, and that can reflect back to you what you're getting from the world, because the world just instinctively knows that you value yourself more, so the world will value yourself more. So some very powerful visualization can be very important to you to seize the golden prize this month. To understand what year 2026 holds for you, please click on the link within this video and you can watch your Aquarius deep dive video. Thank you so much for joining me, fellow water carriers, water bearers. Have a great October, all the best, and goodbye. And Pisces, your in-depth monthly forecast for October 2025. I'm going to share with you some of the big themes of this month to begin with. Then on screen, I'm going to share your event chart right at the beginning of the month, which always provides a backdrop energy for the whole period. I'll then go through each of the key influences frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what to look forwards to this month. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. Please also though click or tap the bell notification symbol. As you come into this month, there is intense energy playing out in the sign of Libra, which we know is about balance, communication and fairness, but for you it's house 8. House 8 can be about transformations. It can be where we're showing greater commitment into something, or it could be where we're realizing something isn't working and we're starting to work out our exit route. So it's either all in or it can be all out, but it can be very powerful. But also at the start of this month, Mars, the planet of passion and desire, in your sister water sign of Scorpio, links very well to the Sun. So even if things are changing, it could feel very dynamic about that change. Now on the screen now, I'm sharing your event chart. We need to be mindful of your two rulers, Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune's returning home to you on the 22nd for one final visit in a huge cycle that takes 165 years in total to complete. So it will be in Pisces from the 22nd through to the 26th of January. It will then move back into Aries, where it's been since the 30th of March. Now Jupiter, your traditional ruler, moved into a fantastic part of your chart in the early part of June. When that happens every 12 or 13 years, it may have given you an opportunity to rejuvenate the fun, creative and expressive part of your situation, perhaps even your social life or your love life too. But the 5th house can also be about speculation, and Jupiter can be about luck. How's your luck gone since early June? Because in the middle of June, Jupiter clashed with Saturn, now back in your sign of course, but at that time in the part of your scope to do with everyday money. If things haven't been going quite as well as you would have hoped around your finances, or perhaps around some investments, or perhaps around even a romantic situation, do know that Jupiter's coming back to you in a very, very positive way the longer this month goes on. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far, all of us. It's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. But as we begin this month, Pisces, Jupiter is in a square with Mercury and an opposition with the Moon. Now the Jupiter opposition with the Moon is one of the good guy oppositions in astrology. I think it gives you a sense of optimism, to be honest. But that 8th house energy of Mercury can be about business and it can be about investment. If you are discussing something and it seems on the face of it to be very positive, just make sure that there are clearly defined guidelines evolved between you and who you're collaborating with that really make it clear what the risks are, but what the benefits are, but also what your responsibilities are. Now, also at the start of the month, the Sun in Libra, very much about balance, fairness, and so on, is in a semi-sextile with Mars. If something is changing in your world, but you do want to liberate yourself from something that's felt cloying, possessive, and controlling, that's a great opportunity. Mars really is going to give you much more thrust to seek that freedom. But I want to make you aware of Uranus right at the bottom of the wheel on that 4th house cusp, in retrograde, but also in a trine with Pluto in your 12th house. You may be surprised, I feel, at times this month that some issues do come up from your past or a more sensitive or emotional nature and could surprise you about how that happens. Maybe someone's going to make an observation, not necessarily in a sinister way, but some kind of greater awareness to your deeper psychological patterns may become clearer. The other thing to share about the event chart is that Venus, the planet of relating, starts this month in house 7. It's not its favourite location being in Virgo. It's a bit more restrained, a bit less glamorous in Virgo, but the 7th house gives you an appetite to try to find some equilibrium. So with the Libran energy and Venus in the 7th, even if you're wanting to change something, you're probably wanting to change it in a way that doesn't create too much instability. And part of the reason for that could be that Saturn back in your sign has taught you some very valuable lessons over the last couple of years about what some of your limitations may be, about how harsh life can be at times. It may be that your physical vitality has been lower. It may have just been quite humbling in a way, but that's not a bad thing if you developed a more realistic outlook. However, as we come into this month on the 6th, Mercury darts into the sign of Scorpio, 9th house. If there is something that's felt very oppressive, whether it's an interest that's lost its sparkle, whether it's group dynamics, whether it is a romantic relationship, you may want to free yourself around about the 6th. If it's a longer term tie that's more complex, maybe there's other stakeholders involved, I feel that as Mercury makes progress this month and links up with Mars exactly on the 20th, but from the 15th to the 26th they're in touch, your desire to be a free spirit is really turned up to max. So if something is too cloying, possessive, controlling, you're going to want to break free this month, to be honest, particularly once the Sun moves into Scorpio on the 23rd. But we've got a lot to get through before then. So on the 7th, we have a full moon. Balancing the ins and outgoings for all of us, with the cost of living having gone up in recent years, has become quite a regular theme. But for you, you're being asked to revisit this, just to reassure you there aren't really any particularly negative vibes feeding into that full moon. It's just making sure that you're doing your best to make sure things are balanced. Think of the 2 of coins in tarot. It can be a little back and forwards. Doesn't mean to say you can't make progress as the month goes on, but just be aware of what you want to economize on and make sure that you're getting value for whatever you are spending your cash on. The 13th, however, sees Venus replace Mercury in the sign of Libra. Now, Venus rules this sign, but the 8th house for Venus can be very intense, even all the way to be quite steamy. If there is some kind of complex relationship that you're involved in, if it is a bit hot and cold, if it's feisty at times, perhaps very passionate, Venus will turn up the temperature. Venus also links to Pluto and also Uranus. Again, that more psychological side of your situation, there may be more revelations at the heart of this month. Pluto goes direct on the 14th. If from the 5th of May you have been feeling vulnerable at times, maybe some old issues have come up, maybe you've wanted to withdraw a little bit, maybe you felt very sensitive, I think Pluto going direct will soften those energies, but he is there for the long term, and essentially he is pushing you really to work harder at understanding the deeper machinations of your responses, but also those of others. As I mentioned before, from the 15th to the 26th, but culminating exactly on the 20th, Mercury and Mars exactly together. If you're really feeling restless and you want to do something daring, you might find yourself quite impulsive, booking a flight somewhere last minute. You may decide to just head off somewhere without too much preparation. You may want to book a course of higher education, learn a language. You may be much more outspoken than ordinarily might be the case around that time. And then on the 21st, with the new moon in your 8th house, ordinarily each year that would be a great opportunity to think about the transformations going on in a positive way. It's a new moon that's quite challenged actually by Saturn in your sign and Pluto in Aquarius. I feel that it's important not to have too high expectations. Life is changing for us all the time. The more philosophical you can be about that, the more you don't resist that change, the better it is. But your modern aquatic ruler returns to your sign on the 22nd and is going to be with you through to the end of January 26th. So joins Saturn. So if you recall, Neptune's been with you full time since 2012 until March the 30th this year. So it's been with you a long time. It may have been incredibly inspirational when it comes to your gifts with art, music, prayer, meditation, healing, spirituality, psychic work if you do that. All of those things you may have been absolutely brilliant at times. But one of the downsides with Neptune, of course, is it can distort. And it depends exactly where your planets are within Pisces. But if it is on the Sun, the Moon, or the Ascendant, you may find that your physical vitality is lower and you could also feel hypersensitive through to the early part of next year. And because Saturn's there as well, Saturn doesn't really make it easy for us. We have to work at it. So if you are soaking up energy from people that aren't feeling great for you, remember the energy that's developing Scorpio, which comes with the Sun on the 23rd, is talking to you about the need for liberation, space and independence. So if you do feel locked into something that feels controlled or a bit addictive, it may even be some lifestyle choices, you do have a signpost moment, a crossroads, but it's a crossroads with tremendous energy to change things in a hugely dynamic way in the latter part of this month. If it's a job you're not enjoying, if it's people that just seem to carp and not really appreciate what you give, that part of you that when you're fired up can be very much more decisive is definitely going to be activated. And then Pisces, the critical thing is, whereas Jupiter was squared off by Saturn when he first arrived into Cancer in June, in the last phase of this month, the last week, he forges a stunning link with Saturn, but also with Mars. If we think Mars and Jupiter together in a trine is action and confidence, if we think about Saturn, we're thinking about a bit of anchoring, a bit of rooting, a bit of common sense. So Jupiter and Mars can get a little carried away with themselves. Saturn's there to provide some resistance, but in a balancing way. So Saturn 1, you the individual, your body. Jupiter 5, where you manifest your highest and most passionate hopes in terms of creativity and expressing yourself. And Mars in 9th, breaking open new frontiers, doing things differently, having the confidence to really follow your dreams, follow your soul purpose. So very, very exciting energies towards the end of this month. But I feel the earlier parts of the month are almost shining a mirror back at you about some of the things that you let perhaps control you. And it may not feel like that. It may feel that it's whoever you're with is the villain or whoever you work with. But somehow or another, it's your relationship to that control that you can change. And that comes with that energy in Scorpio, latterly in the month, but also the dazzling alliance between Jupiter, Saturn and Mars. Now the month comes to a close with Mercury going right to the top of your chart. It's not happy in Sagittarius, to be honest. For the third year running, it's going to start 2026 in Sagittarius, where it's in its detriment, but for you it's the 10th house, and that's work. And being opposite Uranus, to do with your emotions, and being as much open to freeing yourself from anything that's limiting your ability to be totally authentically you, that could be a really interesting influence as the month comes to a close. It could give you even more impulse to make a change if something isn't working. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive Pisces forecast, please see the link within this video, Pisces. But have a great October, wishing you all the best, and goodbye.